Lost is the weakest healer, only able to use a basic healing spell, and because of this, he gets kicked out from his party. Everyone around him labels him as an ignorant loser, but they had no idea he possesses a hidden power unlike anything they have ever seen. So what will happen when the weakest healer turns out to be the strongest adventurer of all? The story kicks off when this young girl gets stranded, left all by herself after a gang of goblins wrecks the carriage she was riding in. These goblins are about to finish her off, but out of nowhere, this mysterious kid shows up and throws down to protect her. The girl's blown away by how tough this adventurer is. Fast forward a few years, Lost is chilling at the guild when a girl comes up and asks to team up with him. The whole guild stops what they're doing, stunned that anyone would ask Lost of all people to party up. Even Lost himself can't believe it. He's confused as to why she would pick him. But then she points out the sign he's holding, saying he's looking for people to join his crew. Her name's Narcina, and she introduces herself as a martial artist who needs a partner. But before Lost can even say a word, the guild's receptionist Amherst rushes over and grabs Narcina by the shoulders. She straight up tells her that Lost is worthless. Yes, he's a healer, but all he's ever learned is that one weak healing spell. Even though he's been in the adventuring game since he was a kid, he can't use any big healing magic or even heal a group. Everyone in town thinks he's a joke. Despite that, there was a crew called Blade of Lightning that took him in for a while, but he was so bad that they eventually booted him out. Now, since everyone sees him as a failure, nobody wants him on their team anymore. Amherst warns Narcina, telling her she won't make any money working with someone as clueless as Lost. But Narcina's got stacks of cash, so making a profit isn't a concern for her. To prove her point, Narcina pulls out a fat bag of money. And it's clear she doesn't know the streets because in a place like Detroit, she would have been robbed on sight. Amherst tells her she better be careful since a lot of adventurers around here don't exactly follow the rules. Narcina thanks Amherst for the tip and says she'll keep it in mind, but by the way she acts, it's obvious she didn't fully get what Amherst was saying. Amherst figures Narcina must be new to the game and offers to hook her up with some rookie-friendly adventurers to help her make it through the day without getting jacked. So Amherst says she'll help them out. But of course, she's gonna charge a little something for her services. Narcina appreciates it, but she made up her mind a long time ago Lost is the only one she's rolling with. She's sticking to that. Amherst still doesn't think it's a smart move, but since Narcina's dead set on it, she gets the paperwork going to make it official. Narcina's curious about the papers, so Amherst explains they need to sign the registration to get officially recognized as a guild crew. Lost knocks out his part of the paperwork, then asks Narcina to sign her name. She was busy checking him out and gets caught off guard, but she goes ahead and signs. Once Lost covers the commission fee, it's a done deal, they're officially a party. As they roll out of the guild, Lost starts talking to Narcina about the Mardat Labyrinth, cause that's where they're headed next. Turns out, no one's ever explored all the way to the end of the Mardat Labyrinth, so nobody knows what kind of beast is running the show down there or how deep it goes. Naturally, adventurers from all over started trying their luck, chasing the big rewards that might be waiting at the end. All those people coming through helped Mardat grow into the biggest labyrinth city out there. Narcina is soaking up everything Lost says, but she's a little nervous and asks if it's cool to hit the labyrinth right away. Amherst had warned Lost not to drag Narcina into the labyrinth too soon since she's still a rookie, and Lost definitely remembers, but he's brushing it off. Because of all the magic leaking out of the labyrinth, monsters can spawn in different spots around the city. The mountains, forest, wetlands, and plains are all areas where they show up. But out of all those, the plains are the safest since only weak monsters pop up there. Usually, a newbie adventurer would start off fighting in the plains to get a little battle practice. But the area's so big it can be tough to even find a monster to fight. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, they show up by the dozen. As long as you don't go too deep, the monsters aren't too strong. So Lost figures it's the fastest way for Narcina to level up her skills. Narcina's all in with Lost's plan, so they keep pushing toward the entrance of the labyrinth. But right before they head inside, she's hyped to pull her weight and says she's gonna take point, since fighters are supposed to lead from the front. Now, Lost usually doesn't hang back when he hits the labyrinth, but seeing how excited she is to take charge, he decides to let her do her thing. As they walk through the dungeon, though he starts second-guessing whether Narcina's got the skills to handle herself in a fight. But then she shuts all that down real quick. Turns out, Narcina knows how to throw hands, and she handles a pack of goblins like it's nothing. She wipes them out without breaking a sweat, and Lost is straight up impressed with her moves. After the goblins bite the dust, they leave behind magic stones, and Lost picks them up. He breaks it down for Narcina, telling her adventurers turn these stones in at the guild for cash. She's curious about what the guild does with the stones, so Lost explains that they hold magical energy and get used in all kinds of tools and gear. That's the kind of thing most adventurers know, but Narcina's never been big on book smarts. They end up with 5 stones, and even though goblin stones don't go for much, they'll make enough to cover a place to stay for the night. Lost gives her the option they can call it quits and head back, or they can dive deeper into the labyrinth and earn some more. Narcina's having a blast, so she's all for going deeper. As they move in further, Lost suddenly grabs Narcina and pulls her back. She's thrown off at first, not sure why, but then he picks up a rock and tosses it on the tile ahead. The ground opens up, it's a trap. If Lost hadn't stepped in, she would have fallen straight into a death pit. Narsina's stunned and asks how he spotted the trap. Lost explains that the tile was a different shade of gray than the rest, so he figured something was off. She's impressed, but points out that spotting traps is usually a thief's job. She's wondering how a healer like Lost is so sharp with this kind of stuff. He just shrugs it off, saying he's been in the adventuring game long enough to pick up a few tricks along the way. They keep moving through the labyrinth, but before long, they run into an orc wandering the halls. Lost is caught off guard, cause orcs are mid-level monsters, they're not supposed to be up this high in the labyrinth. Narsina, seeing the size of this thing, asks if they should turn around and get out of there. Lost figures they don't need to run. He thinks that between the two of them, they've got enough power to take the orc down, but he's not about to make her fight if she doesn't feel ready. Narsina trusts his judgment and says she's down if he thinks they can win. They get set, and she charges right at the orc. But when her first kick connects, it's like hitting a solid boulder instead of a monster. The orc swings its club, aiming to crush her, but Narsina manages to block it with her hands. The hit's so strong though, it pushes her into a corner with nowhere to go. As the orc winds up for another strike, Lost jumps in, and with one clean stab of his sword, takes the orc down. He checks on Narsina, asking if she's alright. She's amazed and thankful that he saved her, but at the same time, she's wondering how Lost, who's supposed to be a healer, pulled that off. Lost brushes it off, saying he's picked up some fighting skills over the years. But right now, they've still got work to do, so they grab the magic stone from the orc. It's way bigger than the ones they got from the goblins, and since it's packed with more magic, they'll make a lot more money from it. Lost gives Narsina the option to head back to the guild, saying they've made enough cash for the day, and she's more than proved her skills. But Narsina isn't ready to call it quits, yet she wants to keep going. Lost agrees, and by the end of their run, they've stacked up a good amount of magic stones. When they return to the guild, they hand everything over to Amherst, and she's shocked they collected so many stones in just half a day. Then she spots the orc stone, and immediately starts chewing Lost out. She's mad because she specifically warned him not to take Narsina into the labyrinth, especially near the mid-level floors, since she's a beginner. Lost defends himself, saying he didn't take Narsina deep into the labyrinth at all, they stayed on the beginner level the whole time. The plan was to fight goblins, but for some reason, an orc ended up wandering up to the higher floors where they were. Narsina backs up Lost's story, so Amherst believes him. Besides, it's not too wild a tale since there's been a lot of reports lately about high-level monsters popping up in areas meant for beginners. Amherst doesn't know what's going on down in the labyrinth, but she figures it's probably something bad. Not that she cares all that much, she's not getting paid enough to stress over it. Then she asks Lost if he's planning to sell all the gems they collected. Lost says yes, and Amherst's whole vibe switches. She gets way too excited as she starts prepping his payment. Narsina notices how hyped Amherst is about buying these magic stones, and Lost explains that guild staff like her get a big commission when they buy stones from the adventurers they manage. When the money's ready, Lost is floored by how much they're getting, but Amherst reminds him half of that belongs to Narsina. Lost knows, but even his half is like 10 times more than he ever made when he was with Lightning Blade. That's when it hits him Lightning Blade had been ripping him off the whole time. Amherst finds that pretty funny, but Narsina steps in and reminds her that the guild is supposed to step in and settle pay disputes. Amherst says she can help Lost get his money back if he wants. He thinks about it for a minute, but then decides to let it go. He's got a new party now and doesn't want anything to do with Lightning Blade anymore. After Lost leaves, the guild's branch manager steps out. While Amherst is busy counting her money, the manager Handsome walks up and asks if Lost was just there. He wants to make sure Amherst didn't refer Lost to any parties. She tells him no way, she wouldn't dare send that fool to any group. But she mentions that there was one girl who insisted on teaming up with him, so her hands were tied. Meanwhile, Lost and Narsina roll up to an inn, where the innkeeper's daughter greets them. She asks if Narsina is the new girl who joined his party, and Lost says yes. He's a little curious how she already knows about it. The girl explains that word's been getting around. Nobody thought Lost would ever find someone to form a party with, but putting that aside, she asks if they're here to grab some food. Lost is definitely down for a meal, but first he wants to reserve a room, so he heads over to talk to the girl's mom. Mary smiles and asks if they want one room or two, tossing in a little tease about sleeping together. Narsina blushes at the thought, but Lost quickly says they'll take separate rooms. Truth is, Narsina didn't mind the idea of sharing a bed with him, even if she wasn't about to say it out loud. Later that night, they both head to bed. Once Narsina's alone in her room, her mind drifts back to the first time she crossed paths with Lost years ago. He'd saved her from a nasty accident and healed her with that basic healing spell of his. She was so grateful that day. In that moment, she made up her mind she was going to become an adventurer and stick by his side no matter what. Since then, Narsina had thrown herself into training day and night. and when she heard Lost got kicked out of his old party, she rushed straight to the capital to be the first one in line to team up with him. But now, as she lies in bed, she realizes something Lost probably doesn't even remember her. Not that it's surprising, she's changed a lot. She's taller, dresses differently, and even dyed her hair blue. It's like she's a whole different person. And now that she's here, she's seeing that Lost is way more talented than she thought. He doesn't need her protection like she imagined. But even if he never recognizes her, she's still determined to stand by him. Still, she can't help but wonder why people in this city think Lost's some kind of idiot, even though he's really strong. The story flips back to the past, showing Lost in a fierce battle with a Hydra, fighting alongside his old crew. They're getting worked, and the crew's thief is hurt bad. Lost steps up, healing her. She asks him if his healing spell can deal with poison, and he admits it can't. But if he helps her regain her strength, she'll be able to handle the poison on her own. The thief grumbles about it, and their boss snaps, telling them to stop whining and hurry up with the treatment. The thief fires back, telling their idiot leader she's in no shape to fight. The boss turns to Lost and orders him to fix her up. Lost reminds him that he told him to bring some antidote, but the leader was too cheap to buy them since they cost a fortune. The leader flips it on Lost, blaming him for only knowing basic healing spells despite being the team's healer. He then calls on Armia, the magician, who's frozen in fear, to hit the Hydra with some magic. She snaps out of it and hurls a fireball at the beast, but it doesn't do a thing. The leader, frustrated and thinking his whole crew is useless, realizes they're in over their heads. He bails, shouting for everyone to retreat. Armia takes off after him, and Lost helps the thief Saberia escape by lending her a shoulder. The next day, Lost gets blamed for the mission's failure and gets kicked out of the group. Saberia tells him it's all because of him that they couldn't take down the Hydra, but Lost fires back, saying it's because she and the leader were too hyped up, stayed up all night, and couldn't perform at their best. The leader, feeling called out, asks if Lost is blaming them. Lost says he's not, but they turn to Armia for backup. Intimidated, she crumbles and points the finger at Lost, blaming him for everything. Turns out, Lost was dreaming about all this, and he wakes up, realizing the memory still haunts him. He drinks some water, thinking back to how something similar happened 6 years ago. Back then, he was already known as a fool, but he had big dreams of becoming a top-tier adventurer. That's when a certain crew hit him up, and he jumped at the chance to join them. But they didn't plan on using him for healing at all. They threw him right in front of the monsters, treating him as bait. Lost took off running, dodging their attacks, thinking how he'd been treated this way his whole life as a labyrinth orphan. But that didn't make it any easier to swallow. When the monsters got bored of chasing him, they went after his party and wiped them all out. Lost barely made it out alive, and it gnawed at him that nobody would ever see him as a real adventurer. That's when he stumbled on some goblins attacking a carriage. Inside, a girl was hiding from the monsters. He didn't even know why, but he stepped in to save her. He figured maybe he could trade his worthless life to protect her, making his death mean something. But the monsters took him down. When he came to, he saw the girl standing in front of him, happy that he was awake. She told him that the knights had shown up and saved her just in time, and he felt like a fool for not being able to protect even one girl. But she still thanked him, saying the knights wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for him buying her some time. She even said he looked cool fighting those monsters. That's when he noticed she was hurt, so he quickly used his healing spell on her, and she thanked him again. He told her healing was all he could do, then spilled the whole story about how his crew had used him as live bait. Hearing that broke her heart, and she started crying for him. Right then and there, she made up her mind. She told him she was going to become an adventurer when she grew up, and when she did, she'd join his party and protect him. Lost was touched hearing that, but after she left with the knights, he thought about how unlikely it was. She probably came from some noble family, so the idea of them teaming up one day didn't seem real to him. But her words gave him a spark of hope, and he decided to give the adventuring life another shot. He found some mentors to train him in sword fighting and magic. While he only had his healing spell as a healer, he mastered a bunch of other skills. After his training, he finally found a new crew to roll with the Blades of Lightning. He figures it makes sense for him to be dreaming about all that. Lost knows he wouldn't be where he's at today if it wasn't for that girl's words back then. If he had quit being an adventurer, he never would have crossed paths with her again. As he's lost in thought, Narcina knocks on his door, asking if he wants to grab breakfast together. He agrees, and they head out to eat. Next, the scene cuts to them in the labyrinth. Lost says they're heading down to the lower levels today. Soon after, they find themselves on a labyrinth floor with a teleportation circle. Narcina is excited, saying she's never seen one before. Lost explains that not every labyrinth has these circles, and a magician put this one here after the place was discovered. But even he doesn't know much more about it. Narcina gets hyped, thinking they can use it to go anywhere, but Lost sets her straight. He tells her they can only jump to another teleportation circle. They'll need one on the other end to exit. Narcina sighs, thinking it would be way easier if they had a circle back in the city. But then she figures maybe they didn't place one there because monsters could swarm the city. Lost tells her that's not the issue, monsters can't use these circles, but the knowledge to make them was lost hundreds of years ago, so they can't create any new ones. They step into the teleportation circle and jump to the middle levels. Lost warns Narcina that the monsters here are tougher than the ones they fought before, so she needs to stay sharp. The scene shifts to them in battle. Lost handles his share of monsters, but when Narcina tries to hit one, her punch slides right through it. Lost explains that it's a lick, a monster made entirely of spirit energy. Physical attacks won't do a thing against it. Narcina realizes that makes sense since she can see right through its body. Lost says they should fall back because without magic, they're at a disadvantage. But Narcina says she can take the lick down, and Lost immediately knows what she's getting at. He keeps the lick's attention while Narcina hides, getting ready for her move. As Lost runs, he explains that with enough training, people can learn to control their prana, the spirit energy inside them. With it, they can fight spiritual beings, even ones like the lick. Meanwhile, Narcina charges her fist with prana and takes out the lick with one solid punch. She's feeling good about the win, but Lost notices she's hurt. Checking her injury, he figures she got it during the attack on the lick. He pulls out an item and casts a healing spell on her, explaining that it's a magic item that boosts the power of healing spells. He goes on to say there's a magic stone inside the item. The guild collects these magic stones from adventurers and hands them over to craftsmen, who turn them into magic items and give them back to the adventurers. After Narcina is patched up, she asks Lost how much the magic stone might sell for. Lost thinks it should bring in a good bit of money. They sell the stone to Amherst, and she pays them for it. On their way back to the inn, Lost is surprised at how much they made from the stone. As they walk through the town, they spot some people arguing in the street. They move in for a closer look and see two adventurers ready to throw hands. Lost tells Narcina that this kind of thing has been happening a lot lately. He explains that adventurers who've caused trouble elsewhere have been flocking to this town. Narcina remembers Amherst saying something about that too, and they notice rough-looking adventurers hanging around all over the place. Lost thinks it's a real headache for the serious adventurers, and he's clearly fed up with the mess. But he changes the topic, suggesting they splurge on a nice meal since they've just been paid. The scene cuts to them enjoying some fancy food at the inn. The innkeeper worries aloud if Lost can pay for everything. He reassures her not to sweat it and orders some ale. Seeing that, Narcina tries to order ale too, but she gets turned down because she's too young. She's annoyed, not liking being treated like a kid. After they finish eating, Narcina asks Lost about a strange-looking tower at the edge of town. She's seen similar structures all over the place, but can't figure out what they are. Lost admits it's a bit weird. He tells her that he got curious once and asked the workers building the towers, but even they didn't know who hired them or why they were putting the towers up. Narcina's caught off guard hearing all that. Lost breaks it down, saying the builder only dealt with an agent who had the blueprints and the cash. But that agent was working for another agent, and that agent was working for yet another one. It was a whole chain of middlemen between the builder and the real owner. Narcina figures whoever wanted these towers built didn't want anyone knowing who they were. Lost shrugs, saying it doesn't matter much as long as it's not hurting anyone. He points out that there are plenty of weird folks out there, but in his opinion, they'd be better off building a wall around the city instead of these towers. Narcina thinks back and realizes the city doesn't even have a wall. She mentions that she kind of likes the way the city looks without one, but Lost counters that it could be a problem if there's ever a war. He asks her how they'd stop outsiders from invading. Narcina, confident, says there's no need for walls with so many adventurers in the city. She figures they'll handle whatever comes their way. Lost admits she's got a point, and the two of them head back to their rooms. Just as Lost is about to enter his room, Narcina stops him, like she wants to say something. She hesitates though and ends up just telling him goodnight. Later, lying in her bed, Narcina's thoughts drift to wanting to be in the same room as Lost, but she can't bring herself to say it. Meanwhile, Lost is also lying in bed, thinking it's nice to be part of a party again. He's unsure if he'll ever run into that little girl from his past, but thanks to Narcina, he knows he can keep adventuring a little longer. The scene shifts to Margulis, the leader of the Blades of Lightning, introducing a new healer named Lyra to the party. The rest of the crew doesn't exactly give her a warm welcome, and it bothers her a bit. Margulis is confident this new team will be able to take down the Hydra, and the scene changes to a dark and eerie place. Handsome is reporting to someone, saying the sleeping princess is in this city and she's teamed up with Lost, pretending to be an adventurer. The old man he's talking to is shocked Lost is still hanging around. He says they need to find a way to take Lost out fast, and Handsome agrees they're running out of time. The crew heads back to the swamp to face off with the Hydra, and they're in luck cause the Hydra hasn't grown its heads back yet. That means less work for them. Margulis wastes no time, comes up with a battle plan on the fly, saying he and Lyra will hit from the front, Armia will back them up with magic, and Saberia will creep up from behind. Margulis is about to charge in when Lyra throws up her hands, calling for a timeout. She's no fighter, she's a healer, and there's no way she's stepping up on the front lines. Margulis looks at her like she's speaking a different language Lost used to fight up front with them all the time. Lyra's in shock, asking how they made their old healer fight in the front lines, but Saberia remembers Lost never seemed to mind. Matter of fact, Saberia chimes in. Lost landed some solid hits, and was even the one who chopped off one of the Hydra's heads. Lyra's not buying it, but Margulis ain't expecting her to pull off moves like that. If she says she can't fight in the front, he's cool with it. But he checks if she can cast the detoxify spell to deal with the Hydra's poison, and she's good for that. Margulis calls out for everyone to get in position, they're taking the Hydra down today. Meanwhile, back in town, Lost and Narcina roll in from their latest labyrinth run, and Amherst is happy to see they've brought more gems for her to sell. But she gives Lost a heads up, telling him not to push Narcina too hard since she's still new to the game. Lost reassures her he's watching out for Narcina, keeping their fights under control. Amherst is glad they're playing it safe, but she reminds him there's only so much two people can handle. She suggests Lost and Narcina think about adding more folks to the party to lighten the load. Lost agrees having more people would make life easier, but in the end, he decides it's not worth the headache. Him and Narcina are making good money as is. Amherst can't argue with that. With the cash they're pulling in, they could even rent a house instead of sticking to the inn. Narcina's surprised you can rent a house in the city, so Amherst breaks it down there's only so much stuff you can stash at an inn. But with a private room, you've got way more space, though it costs a pretty penny. But the real fun starts when you got both guys and girls in the mix. And with that extra privacy, it sets the stage for some late night moves. Narcina's all of a sudden hyped about renting out a private crib, though Lost didn't really trip on it. So Amherst is doubting any late night action is going down this time around. Speaking of private spots, Lost remembers Lightning Blade had one too, but they had him posted up in a storage closet, so it wasn't exactly a 5-star experience. Amherst cracks up at how bad they treated Lost, but to cheer him up, she tells him he might have lucked out getting kicked out of Lightning Blade. Ever since he left, Margulis and the rest of them ain't completed a single mission. Margulis is scratching his head, trying to figure out why, but Lyra can see clear as Day Dude's too slow to realize he ain't strong enough to take on a Hydra by himself. Margulis hears her, so he's about to blow up, but Lyra shuts him down, telling him to chill. She needs to focus on helping Armia get better. Armia was messed up real bad, hurt and poisoned, so Lyra's really gotta lock in. While she's doing that, Saberia's over there telling Margulis that, even though she hates to admit it, Lost might have been more useful than they gave him credit for. Lost wasn't the best healer, but he still managed to handle his business in the end. Plus, he didn't even realize they were hustling him for his cash, so he was the perfect team player. Now Margulis is kicking himself, wishing Lost never left. But Saberia reminds him that he's the one who booted Lost out in the first place and made a whole big scene about it. Margulis had completely forgotten about that. But now that he remembers, he thinks it'll be no sweat getting Lost back. All they gotta do is ask, and Margulis is sure Lost will come running back, because after all, they're the famous Lightning Blades, who would turn down a spot in the squad. We are the best, though Saberia is starting to wonder if she even wants to stick around anymore. By the next morning, Lyra finally finishes healing Armia. Armia wakes up, thanks her for the save, and Lyra's just happy she could help. She asks Armia if she's feeling up to eating, and since Armia's down, Lyra heads downstairs to grab her some food. When Lyra heads downstairs to ask where the food's kept, she notices Saberia and Margulis are nowhere to be found. She's got no clue where they ran off to. Meanwhile, Margulis and Saberia are posted up at the guild, and Margulis, loud as ever, announces that he's graciously ready to let Lost back into the squad. Everyone freezes, staring at him like he's lost it, and Lost is the most stunned of all. He can't believe what he's hearing, so he tells Margulis to say it again. There's no way someone could be this clueless. Margulis repeats it, word for word, and yup, Lost heard him right. But Lost is still sitting there, wondering how to even respond to something so dumb. Narcina and Amherst peep what's going on, and Amherst fills her in. The blonde guy running his mouth is the same one who kicked Lost out, and now he's trying to get him back, acting like he's doing Lost some big favor. Lost isn't impressed by the speech, but before he can speak, Margulis starts assuming Lost might be mad about how they scammed him out of his pay while he was in the crew. Margulis throws out an apology, pretending it was all some big misunderstanding, and promises Lost a fair cut this time around. He even admits they could use his help, cause the new healer he hired ain't pulling her weight in fights. Saberia's thinking there's no way Lost would ever say yes to Margulis's nonsense. But to her surprise, Lost actually thanks him for the offer. Narcina ain't having it no way, she's letting Margulis swoop in and steal Lost from her. She rushes forward, yelling that Lost is never going back to Margulis's party. Lost places a hand on Narcina's shoulder, calming her down, telling her not to worry, he's not leaving. Then he turns to Margulis and says he was only being polite by thanking him, but he has zero interest in ever rejoining that crew. Margulis can't believe he's getting rejected, so he starts getting desperate, accusing Narcina of using Lost because she realized he's actually real useful to have around. His finger pointing is starting to wear thin on Lost's patience, so Lost grabs Margulis's hand and looks him dead in the eye. He warns him that if Margulis ever does anything to hurt Narcina, Lost will make sure his body ends up mangled beyond recognition. With that, Lost turns to leave, and Narcina takes a second to rub it in, throwing one last jab in Margulis's face before they walk out. After Lost and Narcina leave, Margulis is lost, but he's still dead set on taking down the Hydra. Frustrated, he starts barking at Amherst to find him a new adventurer, preferably someone who can hold their own on the front lines next to him. Amherst really doesn't want to deal with him, but before she can respond, a guy steps out from the crowd. This dude looks like he's already crushed all the side quests and rolled up with maxed out stats. The mystery man offers to join the crew and asks Margulis if his strength is up to par. Margulis sizes him up, and yes, the guy looks tough, but Margulis isn't about to take any chances. He draws his sword and charges at him to test his skills. But in one smooth swing, the man disarms Margulis in front of the entire guild, making him look like a complete fool. After shaking off the humiliation, Margulis accepts the guy into the party. Saberia, though, isn't feeling it. She's skeptical of anyone who rocks a mask all the time, but Margulis brushes it off, saying they've got no other option. If they don't take down that Hydra, the Lightning Blade's reputation is going to sink like Aquaman. Margulis steps up to the guy and asks his name. The man gives him a simple answer, Shig. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Narcina's checking herself in the mirror when she hears a knock on Lost's door. Curious, she heads over to see who it is and finds Sheila standing there. Her first thought is that Sheila might be trying to pull something with Lost, but after thinking it over, she figures that doesn't make sense. Lost finally opens the door, and Sheila lets him know that he's got visitors waiting for him downstairs. Lost is surprised but decides to go check it out. When they get downstairs, Lost and Narcina meet up with Armia and Lyra. Armia's feeling guilty for dropping this on him so suddenly, but she asks if Lost could help them out just this once. Margulis is still planning to take down the Hydra and even brought in a new warrior to back him up. But Lyra isn't convinced they've got what it takes to win without Lost's help. For starters, Margulis is still too hard-headed to buy an antidote potion because he's too cheap. He's not gonna realize how reckless he's acting until somebody ends up dead because of his stubbornness. Armia knows it's way too late to fix things with an apology, but she admits Lost's strength saved them last time. If he hadn't cut off that Hydra head in their last battle, the whole squad would have been wiped out. Lost doesn't think he did much, but Lyra reminds him how bad the party struggled against a Hydra that had already lost 2 heads. If that thing had been at full strength, they'd be toast. Lost asks Armia straight up what she's looking for him to do. Armia stands up and says she wants Lost to fight alongside them again. She believes they've got a real shot at taking down the Hydra if he's there. Basically, she's asking him to rejoin Lightning Blade, but Lost already went through this mess with Margulis earlier, and his answer's still the same. Narcina's confused about why Armia is so eager to help Margulis out, given how tough all this must be on her. Armia admits yes, Margulis has a ton of flaws, but at the end of the day, he's still her party member. Narcina's fuming when she hears that, cause Lost was her party member too. But Armia didn't lift a finger to support him when he was getting treated like trash. Armia starts breaking down in tears and apologizes to Lost. She explains that back then, she was too scared to stand up to Margulis, afraid she'd get kicked out of the squad too. She's new to the adventuring life and doesn't know any other parties to join. But now she sees how wrong she was, and how wrong Margulis was for how he treated Lost. Even though she doesn't agree with how Margulis runs things, she still doesn't want to see him get himself killed in a fight they can't win. Lyra steps in and tells Lost that Armia's apology is legit. She's been tearing herself up over this for a while. Lost stands up, looks Armia in the eye, and tells her he holds no grudge against her. He accepts her apology, but he's clear he's not going back to Lightning Blade. Armia's a bit let down, but she respects Lost's decision and promises not to bug him about it anymore. Right after, Mary comes over with a spread of food, trying to lift Armia's spirits cause it's clear she ain't been eating right. While Armia digs in, Lost pulls Lyra aside and asks if there's any way for her to take Armia and ditch Margulis's crew. But Lyra makes it clear that if she could have done that, she wouldn't have come asking for help in the first place. Lost knows how Margulis treats people, so he straight up suggests Lyra leave his party too. But Lyra shuts that down quick, saying she can't abandon Armia to deal with Margulis on her own. The next day, Margulis finally introduces Lyra to Shig, since they're gearing up to fight the Hydra again. As soon as she sees him, Lyra feels like she's seen him before, so she pulls him aside for a chat. She asks why he's here and why he's hiding his identity. But Shig tries to play dumb, acting like they've never crossed paths. As he turns to leave though, Lyra spots the sword on his back. It used to belong to someone named Ronaldo, and she straight up accuses Shig of stealing it. Shig denies being a thief, saying the sword was passed down to him as a gift. He might have cleared himself of theft, but admitting he knew Ronaldo confirms for Lyra that he is the same Shig she used to know, even though she's figured him out. Lyra decides to keep his secret under wraps. It must be important to him. Later that day, Lost and Narcina head into the labyrinth like usual, but Lost can't shake his worry for Armia and the rest of Lightning Blade. He's not sure if they're really ready for what's coming. The scene jumps to Narcina fighting monsters in the labyrinth, taking them down without breaking a sweat, even when one tries to sneak up from behind. Lost watches and throws her a compliment. She just brushes it off, saying it's nothing and she can keep going. But then her stomach growls, loud enough for him to hear. Lost grins and jokes that maybe her stomach's reached its limit even if she hasn't. She gets embarrassed and snaps at him, but he laughs and suggests they stop for lunch. She agrees. Next, they're eating the lunch they packed, and Lost is surprised at all the food, asking if there's something special going on. Narcina explains that Mary the innkeeper handed her all this before she left, saying she'd need to finish it up since their little friend couldn't. Then Lost starts explaining about hydras. He tells her it's a powerful monster, with venom and scales tough enough to bounce attacks off easily. Regular physical and magic attacks don't even scratch it. Narcina is surprised it's that strong and hopes Armia will be okay. Lost reassures her that hydras are common enough among higher-level monsters that people have figured out ways to handle them. He adds that hydra poison is deadly, but there's a special antidote to counter it. Narcina remembers that Lyra said they didn't buy that antidote, and Lost explains that it's pretty expensive, so they're relying on Lyra's detox magic instead. Narcina still worries, but Lost tells her there's no need. Lightning Sword isn't a bad team. Margulis might be goofy, but he knows his stuff with a sword, as long as he doesn't underestimate his opponent. And Saberia's agility is off the charts, she could even sneak up on a hydra, wide vision or not. Narcina's not too happy that he has such a high opinion of them, but he says he's just being honest. She stays worried though. Afterward, they keep going on their adventure, and Narcina tells Lost she's tired of the same labyrinth. She wonders if they can check out the wetlands today, and though Lost is a bit surprised, he agrees. We cut to Margulis and his crew taking on a hydra. Margulis manages to injure one of its heads, and Shig gets another hit in on a different head. Margulis yells at him to chop it off, but Shig suddenly stops mid-swing and falls back. Margulis demands to know why he held back, and Shig says that this was supposed to be his prize, asking if Margulis is cool with letting him take all the credit. Margulis doesn't get it at first, so Shig spells it out. The title of Hydra Slayer would look good on you. Margulis, not the brightest, takes the bait and charges right in, but his attack barely does a thing. Meanwhile, Lyra finishes processing Saberia. She jumps back into the fight to distract the Hydra, giving Margulis an opening to attack. Armia is supporting everyone with her magic, and Lyra thinks they'll win if they keep this up. Then she notices Shig taking a break and wonders what he's plotting. Suddenly, the Hydra flings a rock with its tail, hitting Armia and taking her down. The Hydra starts moving toward her, and Armia faints from fear. As she's out cold, black smoke begins oozing from her body, and Saberia asks what's going on. Shig says it's her fear, explaining that monsters can actually feed on human fear, turning it into strength. He adds that fear like this usually isn't visible to the human eye. Just then, the Hydra starts drawing in the fear from everything around it. Lyra sees that the fear is turning into mana, and Saberia wonders if mana should even be showing up here. Lyra explains it doesn't usually. Normally, mana only appears in the deepest parts of the labyrinth. After absorbing all that mana, the Hydra begins to glow, and Lyra realizes it's mutating. She tells everyone that monsters can change their bodies by pulling in a lot of magic power, and sometimes it boosts their abilities by crazy amounts. The Hydra then transforms into a way more powerful creature, and Seek yells to Lyra to go help Armia. She agrees, and Lost tells Margulis to fall back. But Margulis refuses, arguing that they've put in too much work to back down now. He tries to at least take off one of the Hydra's heads, but his sword shatters on impact, and the Hydra nearly lands a hit on him. Lost jumps in just in time to save him. Now Narcina, Lost, and Shig attack the Hydra together and manage to injure it, but only slightly. Then Shig tells Lost to go check on Armia and leave the Hydra to him. Lost agrees and asks Lyra about Armia's condition. Turns out, she's in bad shape, and Lyra explains her healing magic isn't working because Armia, as a wizard, has a resistance to magic. So Lost begins casting multiple layers of healing spells on her. Lyra watches, confused, wondering what he's doing. Saberia explains he's overlaying heal spells, that's how he's always done it. Lyra's shocked that such a technique actually works, comparing it to drinking a bunch of potions, which doesn't instantly cure a cold. She insists it shouldn't be possible. Margulis, clueless, says he doesn't know what a cold feels like since he's never had one, proving, as they say, that idiots don't catch colds. Lyra's still amazed at the layered healing, and Armia eventually wakes up after Lost's done. She spots him, thanks him, then falls right back asleep. Suddenly, the Hydra starts acting like it wants to take on Lost specifically, and Shig catches on to this. Lost wonders if the Hydra remembers him, and Narcina offers to help him out. Lost knows she won't back down even if he says no, so he agrees but tells her to pull back if things get dangerous. Shig then warns Lyra, Margulis, and Saberia to keep their distance from the beast, and they all agree. Lost and Narcina launch their attack, and Shig manages to slice off one of the Hydra's heads. Margulis, surprised, wonders why Shig's sword didn't shatter like his did. Lyra explains it's because Shig has a magic sword. Margulis, shocked, realizes these magic swords are legendary weapons known for their great power. He can't believe Shig actually owns one and wonders who he really is. Narcina charges in to attack the Hydra, but she slips, and the Hydra flings her high into the air. She crashes down, knocked out cold. Lost realizes that the Hydra is looking to face off against him solo, using Narcina as a hostage to make sure no one else interferes. Saberia is shocked, wondering how a monster could be so smart. Lyra explains that mutated monsters can sometimes have advanced intelligence. Lost tells everyone to stay back while he faces the Hydra head-on. But after a rough battle, Lost ends up defeated, struggling to get up. Lyra shouts at him to keep going, and he tries to reach for his weapon, but then passes out. Suddenly, something shifts in him. He gets back on his feet, glowing with a powerful blue aura, and the others are totally stunned, trying to figure out what's going on. Out of nowhere, Lost grows a horn and starts slashing through the Hydra like it's nothing. After he takes it down, he collapses. The scene cuts to him waking up to Narcina calling his name. He's relieved to see she's okay, and she tells him that Lyra had an antidote ready, so she's fine now. Lyra points out that it wasn't cheap and that she's going to bill them for it later. Lost looks over and notices Armia is still asleep. He's relieved to find out she's not in any danger. Lyra then asks him about that strange form he took on earlier, but Lost has no clue what she's talking about. Before he can think it over, Margulis jumps in, saying Lost is seriously strong, and with him around, even the toughest monsters won't stand a chance. Margulis adds that with Lost's help, they might even be able to take down Garlock the Destroyer. Lost tries to remind him that he turned down joining their party, but Margulis waves it off, saying money won't be an issue. They can split the magic stones from the Hydra between him, Saberia, and Lost. Margulis decides that since the two newcomers didn't help, they get nothing. And as for Narcina, since she's just Lost's sidekick, he suggests Lost just finds a way to keep her happy. Lost brings up Armia's situation, and Saberia bluntly says she's not useful anymore. There's a chance she may never wake up, and Margulis throws in the idea of selling her to some noble with pervy tastes. Lost gets mad, but before he can even react, Narcina clocks Margulis with a solid punch. He's stunned, can't believe what just happened. He quickly reminds her that the guild doesn't allow adventurers to fight each other, and warns her that she could get kicked out for breaking the rules. He turns to the others, trying to get witnesses, but they all act like they didn't see a thing. Saberia steps up and says she saw everything, and will report it to the guild. Then Shig chimes in, saying he also heard something about someone planning to sell Armia to some creepy noble before she woke up. He points out that trafficking's a major crime, so they'll need to take Margulis and Saberia in. Margulis is shocked, asks Shig who he really is. The scene cuts to the guild, where it's revealed that Shig is actually Zeg, an elite adventurer straight from the Royal City's Adventurer Guild. We see him tying Margulis and Saberia up as he explains everything. Zeg drops his previous name, saying Shig was just part of his cover, and Lyra teases him, pointing out that his disguise was pretty weak. Amherst, the guild's receptionist, then asks why someone from the capital would be in their small town. Zeg reminds her that direct adventurers have the authority to monitor and regulate other adventurers. He explains that he came to investigate because the town's been having more trouble lately, and almost immediately, he stumbled upon Margulis's shady activities. Lyra asks what's going to happen to Margulis and Saberia now. Amherst responds that they're definitely getting kicked out of the guild and could even face lifetime labor as punishment for human trafficking. Margulis tries to defend himself, saying it was just talk, that they never actually did anything. But Amherst replies that the law's clear, and the two start blaming each other for getting caught. Later, Lost pulls Zeg aside, asking him to spare Margulis and Saberia. Zeg's surprised and asks why he'd want that. Lost explains that they didn't start out this way. Once, they just wanted to be good adventurers, but somewhere along the line, they got lost, chasing fame and money. Lost is sure they didn't mean for it to come to this and hopes Zeg will give them one more chance. Hearing Lost's words from where they're being held, Margulis and Saberia feel regret start to sink in. Zeg decides to go along with Lost's request and tells Margulis and Saberia they're free to go. He warns them to get out of town and hopes they won't cross paths with him again. They quickly take off. Amherst is a bit worried about this whole situation, but Zeg reassures her that getting expelled from the guild might not be the best thing for them. It's better they stay adventurous and keep an eye on them. Amherst isn't convinced that this will actually help, pointing out that Marmot is a small town and things work differently here compared to the capital. Zeg figures he'll stick around for a bit to see how things play out, and Amherst is glad to hear it. Later at the inn, Zeg talks to Lyra and explains why he stayed behind. He wants to keep an eye on the adventurers in this town. He mentions that the guild back in the Royal City thinks the strange mutations happening here might be linked to the Marmot division, so he asks her if she can team up with him to investigate. Lyra agrees, but insists that Armia has to join them too. Zeg's curious why she's so set on that, and she explains she can't just leave her behind like that. Zeg nods, agreeing to let Armia tag along. Having more members makes sense since he'll need to keep an eye on even more people now, and he knows he can't leave Lost unsupervised either. Afterwards, Zeg and his crew sit down with Lost and Narcina over brunch. Lost is shocked to hear they put together a team with only 3 people and asks Armia if she's really okay rolling with them. She answers kinda shy, saying she doesn't have anywhere else to go, and Zeg and Lyra saved her life, so she owes them big. Lost and Zeg tell him they already said she doesn't have to feel guilty about it, but she's stuck with them anyway, and Lost is glad to hear that. After that, Narcina and Lost head out to the guild early in the morning since they forgot to cash in the Hydra's magic stone last night. Lost has another reason, though he's thinking about Narcina's future. He tells her she ought to pick up a specific quest today since only hunting monsters won't get her too far as an adventurer. He explains that quests can be anything. taking down creatures, gathering rare ingredients, or escorting rich folks who pay a good chunk of change. Narcina is touched that Lost is thinking this much about her. When he asks if something's up, she blushes with embarrassment. Soon enough, they reach the guild, where everyone's throwing suspicious looks their way. Word's out about Lost beating the Hydra, and no one believes it. He quickly pulls Narcina aside, warning her to stay sharp now since there are plenty of bad types who'd love to swipe those Hydra stones from them. Right as he finishes, an adventurer named Marnell steps up and says he's got something to discuss with Lost. Lost stays cautious and asks if they have to talk now, which makes Marnell think he's nervous about the guys with him, so he tells them to clear out. Lost and Narcina aren't sure what to think, but they get the sense Marnell isn't after the Hydra stones. Marnell faces Lost and suddenly apologizes, throwing Lost off guard. Lost wonders what the hell is going on, and then Marnell says he's sorry for Margulis's behavior. He admits that everyone in town knew Margulis was scum, but no one warned Lost. Marnell confesses he told himself it wasn't his business and didn't want to stir things up with Margulis. He apologizes for not stepping up when Lost needed it and for letting folks clown on him for being incompetent. Suddenly, Narcina steps in and tells Marnell forgiveness won't come that easy. Marnell, a little nervous, asks her what he needs to do to earn Lost's apology. She says he should kneel before him for 3 days straight and apologize every single day. Marnell and the other adventurers are thrown by the intense punishment that this blue-haired girl's got in mind. But Lost stops her because he doesn't want people to hate him. He says he's not interested in dredging up the past and admits that even after beating the Hydra, he's still got a long way to go as a healer. Extending his hand to Marnell, he suggests they try to get along better from here on out. Marnell shakes his hand gladly and tells Lost to reach out if he ever needs backup, then heads back to his group. Afterwards, Lost and Narcina go over to the reception desk to hand in the Hydra's magic stone. Amherst practically drools when she sees it. It's enough to turn them into millionaires. She points out that the Hydra was already a tough beast, and since it mutated, the stone's worth shot up. But she also warns that the mutation hints a disaster could be brewing. Narcina is confused by how serious Amherst and Lost look talking about the mutation, so they break it down for her. Monsters need massive amounts of mana to mutate. Usually, that only happens in the deeper dungeon floors. If it mutated on the surface, that means something unnatural is causing a mana surge up top. Amherst says other adventurers have reported similar issues, and things might be getting dangerous. Narcina asks why the guild hasn't done something, like sending a team to check it out. Just then, Amherst's boss Handsome shows up. She tenses up when she hears him and quickly tells him the adventurers had a suggestion. Handsome agrees to hear them out directly and invites them to his office, where he reviews the report on the Hydra's mutation and high-level monsters showing up on the dungeon's upper floors. Handsome shrugs it off, saying stuff like this has happened before, so it's not exactly out of the ordinary. He adds that the guild doesn't have the time or resources to send out an investigation team every time something strange pops up. Lost tries pushing him, saying the guild's supposed to protect its adventurers, but Handsome hits back, saying adventurers know the risks they're signing up for. He even tells Lost that if he's so scared of monsters, he should get out of town. When they step out of the office, Narcina's boiling over, letting out all the frustration she built up in those 5 minutes with Handsome. She snaps, asking who the hell he thinks he is telling Lost to leave. Amherst tells her that he's the top dog around here, at least for now. The guild leader's old and barely leaves his room, and Handsome, being his right hand, is the one running the show. Lost changes the subject and asks Amherst to line up some quests for Narcina. She shows them the available jobs, and Narcina grumbles that most of these don't even feel like real work. Amherst flicks her forehead, saying as long as it brings in money, she shouldn't get picky about the type of job. Lost finds a quest to hunt down a phoenix near the teleportation circles in the dungeon. Narcina jumps at it, saying they'll take it. Amherst warns her to hold up, pointing out that with just a healer and a martial artist, they don't stand a chance against a flying creature. Right away, Lost and Narcina think about teaming up with Zeg's crew, so they head straight over to their base. Zeg and Lyra are on board, but Army is hesitant, thinking Lost probably wouldn't want to work with her after everything that went down. Lost reassures her, saying she's already forgiven, so she shouldn't worry about it. With everyone on the same page, Zeg heads to the guild to sort out the paperwork, while the others go to the market for supplies. Lost tells Narcina they need to pick up potions to handle burns from fighting the Phoenix. She's impressed, saying he knows his stuff, but it also makes her feel a bit inadequate. She starts spacing out in the middle of the road, and out of nowhere, a girl sneaks up behind her and grabs her. Narcina breaks free and swings a punch at the redhead, but the woman flips and dodges her with ease. Narcina's shocked when she realizes the mischievous molester is actually Ralma, a veteran adventurer, and an old friend of her dad. She puts 2 and 2 together and figures out her dad sent Ralma after her, worried about his daughter running off. Just then, Lost shows up, and both he and Ralma look stunned to see each other. They go way back. Lost greets her respectfully, calling her master, which leaves Narcina totally confused. They all go to a nearby restaurant, where Lost explains he trained under Ralma for a bit. Narcina mentions that her dad and Ralma are friends, and her dad sent Ralma to check on her. Then Ralma tells Lost to give her and Narcina some space since there's personal stuff she needs to discuss. But Lost refuses, saying he's in Narcina's party, so he's got a right to know what's going on. He also suspects Ralma might try to drag Narcina back by force, and he's not about to let that happen. Ralma smirks, taking it as a challenge, and asks if he really thinks he can stop her. She fires off a small flame at him, but he dodges with perfect timing. Ralma's impressed by how much Lost has improved and agrees to let him stay. She turns to Narcina and asks why she ran off from home. Narcina insists she didn't run away. She says she left in a rush, so she couldn't say a proper goodbye, but she left a note saying she was going to find Lost. Both Lost and Ralma are stunned by this, and Ralma pushes further, asking her why she came looking for him. Narcina falls silent, hiding her face, too embarrassed to admit she'd been having her dad's men spy on Lost. When she found out he got kicked from his party, she raced out to be by his side. Lost tells Narcina she should go back home and work things out with her dad, but she's worried he won't let her come back to Lost's side. She's holding back tears, so Ralma steps in, saying her dad isn't against her being an adventurer, he was just worried about her running off without a word. Ralma promises to talk to her dad, making sure he knows she's safe with Lost. Then, Ralma sends Lost off to grab some drinks and starts nudging Narcina about what's really going on between her and Lost. Narcina starts talking about how amazing Lost is, but then tears up, feeling she's nothing but a burden to him. Ralma reassures her, saying she's definitely made a difference. Lost wouldn't have dared to stand up to her before, but now he's stronger and more confident. Ralma tells Narcina she's had a real, positive impact on him and encourages her to keep spending time with him. Later that night, Ralma stood in front of the guild building, wondering what the old guild leader Mist was planning. The next morning, everyone prepares to face the Phoenix. Sheila gives Lost some food and worried about him, tells him to be careful. Narcina suddenly appears, takes the lunch bag from Lost, and tells Sheila don't worry, I'll be by his side, and that makes Sheila worry even more. Then they leave the town. The scene then cuts to Lost and the others landing on the middle floors of the labyrinth. Narcina's pumped up to face the Phoenix, but the creature doesn't appear. She was expecting it to charge at them right when they stepped in. But Lost tells her it's too cramped here for the Phoenix to make a move. Narcina starts to wonder about the size, and Lost explains that Phoenixes come in all sorts of sizes, but none of them could squeeze through this narrow passage to reach this spot. They keep moving forward, and Zeg mentions that flying creatures don't usually vibe with tight spaces. If they had their way, they'd be somewhere wide open with plenty of room above. Soon, they stumble into a huge open area, and Lyra is sure the Phoenix is here. She points out this is a new path that's barely been explored, which has adventurers thinking there might be hidden treasure around. But the Phoenix is blocking the way forward, so some adventurers have put out a job to take it down. Lost spots scorch marks on the nearby pillars and figures the Phoenix must be around. He tosses a rock forward, hoping to lure the Phoenix out, knowing it's a territorial creature. Sure enough, the Phoenix appears from a portal above, sweeping through the room in a flash. The scene cuts to the Adventurers Guild. Ralma walks in, catching the eye of Amherst, who's quick to greet her with all the charm in the world. Ralma notes that this guild feels welcoming to adventurers, and Amherst agrees, saying they only exist because of the adventurers. But really, Amherst is laying it on thick because she knows Ralma is a top-ranked adventurer. She observes that even though Ralma's outfit isn't flashy, the fabric's high-end and each piece of jewelry she's got on is actually an expensive magic item. Amherst's dead set on keeping her close, knowing Ralma's a real heavyweight in the adventuring world. Amherst asks Ralma what she can do for her, and Ralma straight up says she wants to meet the branch president. Amherst asks again, thinking the request is odd, but Ralma insists, saying she wants to meet Mist. Amherst then checks if Ralma has any kind of referral or appointment, but Ralma's got neither. Amherst figures she must know Mist personally, but Ralma says no, though she's got some business with him, and by business, she means she wants him dead. Hearing that, Amherst immediately denies her access, thinking Ralma must be out of her mind. Ralma, seeing she's not getting in politely, decides she'll have to throw down. She starts casting a fireball, but before she can let it loose, Handsome steps in and stops her. He acknowledges her by name, and Amherst realizes she's dealing with the Flame Fool. Handsome lets Amherst know that if Ralma's serious, she could burn the whole building to the ground. Ralma's relieved someone with authority finally showed up. Meanwhile, back in the labyrinth, the Phoenix keeps flying around, making Narcina think her punches and Lost's sword aren't going to do much here. Lost mentions it might have been smart to bring a bow, but Narcina's not too worried since the Phoenix isn't attacking up close. Right then, the Phoenix hurls a fireball at Narcina, and Lost pulls her out of the way just in time. He warns her that the fireball is the Phoenix's nastiest attack, and Narcina thinks it's far from fair. Back at the guild, Handsome asks Ralma if she's there about the same issue as an adventurer from the day before. He explains that yesterday, an adventurer came by, saying something went down in the labyrinth and wanting them to handle it. Ralma asks what he told the guy, and Handsome says he told him to leave town if he's too scared to go into the labyrinth himself. Ralma makes it clear her business is different, and she comments that it's been a while since she's been in Marmot, but the place seems overrun with thugs now. Handsome says they're concerned too, but Ralma thinks they're behind it and asks why they'd let things get this way. She doesn't know what's going through their heads, but she's certain they're plotting something. She points to the new pillars scattered around town, wondering what's up with those. Handsome tells her he's just as clueless and insists it's got nothing to do with the guild. Ralma doubts him, thinking he's playing dumb. He asks if she's got proof linking the pillars to the guild, but Ralma says it's a gut feeling. Handsome laughs, calling her theory a stretch. Ralma says for a city of the labyrinth, the Adventurers Guild holds absolute power, and the branch president is practically the city's king. But he's acting like he doesn't know what's going on, which doesn't sit right with her. Handsome reminds her he's only the president's right-hand man, but she knows he's just pretending. He tells her if she's got a problem with how things are run, she should hit the road. Ralma's convinced there's something fishy here, noticing that anytime an adventurer questions the guild, they get told to leave. She suspects they're trying to keep folks from sticking around, and Handsome asks what she thinks their angle is. Ralma figures something huge is about to go down, something that might need a bunch of expendable adventurers. She's pretty sure it'll look a lot like a labyrinth rampage, where casualties won't raise any eyebrows. The scene cuts back to the labyrinth, where the Phoenix is going wild, firing off flames everywhere. Zeg sees the room turning into a furnace and realizes this won't end well. Lyra notes that handling the heat's going to be tough, but the real problem is the air. The fire's burning up all the oxygen, and they won't be able to stay much longer. Lost catches on that the Phoenix is trying to force them out to defend its turf, and Narcina remarks that monsters are supposed to attack humans on sight, not try to scare them off. Lost says the Phoenix needs to know it can't take on all 5 of them alone. Sure, monsters might not be thinkers, but this one has got to follow its instincts. Zeg says they've got no choice but to throw down now and asks Armia if she can work some water magic. She mentions that she can, so he tells her to aim for the Phoenix's wings. He explains that those flames on its wings are basically like feathers, so if they can douse them with water, it'll drag the beast down, and then he can finish it off with his sword. Armia hesitates, worried it'll take time to cast her spell, but Zeg reassures her, saying he'll protect her until it's ready. Narcina jumps in, promising to help keep her safe too, which boosts Armia's confidence. With their support, she decides to go for it. Zeg, Lost, and Narcina then move in to keep the Phoenix distracted while Armia starts casting. Lyra watches, knowing that this is a big deal for Armia, especially with her past holding her back. She hopes Armia can find the strength to trust her teammates, believing that if she can, she'll be a solid adventurer. Armia finally fires off a small water arrow at the monster. It works. The Phoenix is dragged lower, and Zeg strikes, but the hit isn't deep enough. The monster rises again, but Lost feels like they have a real shot if they can keep this up. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Handsome is thinking the labyrinth's rampage sounds bad, but he's not too worried. It doesn't usually happen. Ralma points out that it could explain a lot of the weird stuff around town lately. She's especially concerned about the monster mutations, mentioning that the mana around the labyrinth is through the roof. Back in the labyrinth, we see the Phoenix changing, growing bigger as its flames shift from orange to blue. Narcina, thinking mutations are supposed to be rare, and Lost's right there with her, saying it's not normal to run into them twice in a few days. Armia gets freaked out by the mutated monsters, wondering why they keep showing up around her, and Lyra tries to chill her out, but Armia's too far gone for words to help. Lyra's worried this could get bad. If Armia lets fear take over again, that'll just make the monster stronger. She knows Armia has to shake off the fear now, or she'll miss her chance to grow, but Lyra's stumped on how to help. Just then, the Phoenix charges at Armia, and Lyra yells for her to dodge, but Armia's frozen in place. The Phoenix fires a fireball, but Zeg slices through it and saving her. The Phoenix keeps hurling fireballs, and Zeg cuts down every single one, telling Armia they need her help to take this thing down. Lyra reaches out to her, and Armia finally steps up to join the fight. She asks for a second to get ready, and they give her space. Meanwhile, Ralma's left the guild. She's thinking she never expected them to be up front. She heads over to the stone pillars around the city, using her fire magic on them, realizing these aren't just any stones and wondering what they really mean. Back in the labyrinth, we see Narcina landing a punch on the Phoenix, but it barely phases it, and her hand catches fire. She manages to put it out just as the Phoenix attacks her, but Lost steps in, only to have his sword start melting from the heat. Armia is gearing up to cast another attack spell, and Lyra helps her by healing her stamina, knowing it's tough to pull off back-to-back attack spells. Armia fires off an ice arrow, hitting the Phoenix and knocking it down from the sky. Although it quickly regains its wings, Zeg's ready to take it head-on, but Narcina punches it back down, giving Lost the chance to finish it off with a strike from his knife. After they take down the Phoenix, Lost gives Armia props for a job well done, saying it was her magic that sealed the deal. Everyone backs him up on that. Armia is so touched that she starts tearing up, thanking everyone for the support. She picks up the magic crystal from the monster, and while everyone else is celebrating, Lyra leans over to Zeg, saying Lost didn't transform this time. Zeg wonders what that transformation last time really meant and decides he's gonna keep an eye on Lost for a bit. Later, they're all chilling at the inn when they run into Ralma, who's already sipping on a drink. She asks if they managed to take down the Phoenix, and they're curious how she even knows about it. Ralma laughs, saying she got a chatty girl to spill the story for a little cash. Seeing their relaxed faces, she figures they really did beat the monster. She then teases them, saying they ought to use that reward money to buy her dinner. But Lost knows she's got her eye more on the drinks than the food. They all sit down for a meal, and Narcina mentions that she never knew food could taste this good before coming here. Ralma rolls her eyes, saying this meal's nothing special, and even the meat's plain and tough. Sheila, the server, overhears and isn't too happy about it leaving with a huff. Ralma chuckles and tells Narcina to savor the soup since she won't get anything like it back at the mansion. Hearing Mansion throws the others for a loop. Realizing Narcina hasn't shared her background, Ralma spills that Narcina is actually the daughter of the Earl of Anelstria. Everyone's stunned, and Lost finally connects the dots. She's the same girl he saved back then. Meanwhile, Handsome is giving Mist the lowdown on that mutation they saw, and he mentions Ralma's in town too. Mist decides he's going to need his disciples' help with whatever's coming next. The next day, Lost and Narcina roll into the guild, ready to trade that Phoenix magic gem for some serious cash. But when Amherst lays out the payment, Narcina's face twists up. That pouch looks way too light for something as valuable as a Phoenix gem, especially since this one was evolved. That's supposed to mean big bucks. Narcina's thinking Amherst is trying to pull one over on them, handing out crumbs instead of the feast they're owed. But Amherst, while she loves her coins, isn't about stealing. She calmly tells Narcina to check the pouch herself because what's inside is worth every bit of that gem. Sea guilds usually pay adventurers with silver coins, but we're talking hundreds of thousands of silver coins for this gem. Nobody's walking around with that weight in their pocket, so Amherst swapped it out for gold coins, making the whole deal way easier to carry. Narcina takes a peek, and sure enough, Amherst wasn't lying. She's left speechless, fumbling for words. Lost steps and says take the coins already, and hands Amherst her cut without making a fuss. Amherst takes her fee with that smug grin of hers, but as she's heading out, she notices Lost is quieter than usual. Before leaving, she shoots Narcina a look asking if something's up between the two of them. Outside, Narcina catches up with Lost, and they plop down for a snack. Lost isn't saying much, so Narcina takes the lead. She's got something on her mind and asks him outright how about renting a private house with her now that they're loaded. Lost, caught off guard, stares at her, but Narcina's got her reasoning locked down. With the cash they've got, it makes way more sense to rent a house than to keep blowing money on hotel stays. She's even done her homework, checked the housing market, and figures they could even buy a place if they wanted. Not that I'd know about that life. Lost nods, agreeing it's a solid idea, but he's curious why she's bringing this up now. Is she tired of Mary's hotel or something? Narcina shakes her head. The hotel's great cozy rooms, top-tier food, the whole package. Problem is, it's too good, and that means it's packed all the time. Narcina won't say it out loud, but she's craving a spot where she and Lost can hang out and talk without people constantly butting in. Deep down, she's hoping that having that private space might bring them closer, real close, if you catch the drift. But thinking like that makes her blush hard. Meanwhile, Lost is clueless about what's running through her head. He tells her straight up, though, that buying a house together is way too soon. He thinks they should stash their money for emergencies, and besides, they've got to think about the rest of the crew. After the Phoenix hunt, Zeg floated the idea of making their group a permanent squad since they work so well together. Lost hasn't given an answer yet, but he's mulling it over. If they're serious about exploring the deeper levels of the labyrinth, he knows it's gonna be rough for just him and Narcina. That's why he's looking to add some muscle to the team, and Zeg fits the bill perfectly. Dude's a powerhouse. Narcina doesn't love the idea of sharing Lost's attention, but she knows he's right. They need a stronger squad, so she reluctantly agrees to team up with Zeg and the rest of the crew. Later that day, Lost and Narcina meet with the others, and they all decide to merge their parties. Zeg raises his mug for a toast to their new squad, and Mary, overhearing the celebration, decides to hook them up with a special meal on the house. After they've stuffed themselves, Armia's practically out cold, leaning back in a full-on food coma. Since it's late, Lyra steps in, scooping Armia up and dragging her towards the stairs. But just as Lyra's about to head up, Narcina catches her and says she needs to talk. They head upstairs together, and after tucking Armia into bed, Narcina spills about her earlier chat with Lost. She tells Lyra how she asked him about getting a place together and how he shot the idea down. Now she's overthinking it, wondering if Lost secretly hates her. Lyra isn't having that. She reassures Narcina that Lost doesn't hate her, far from it. If anything, he's probably just trying to take things slow because he cares about her a lot. Lost doesn't seem like the type to get all shy about stuff like this, but everybody's got their own way of handling things. Lyra tells Narcina to chill and give him some time to figure it out. Narcina thanks her for the solid advice and admits she came to Lyra because she knew she'd get some real wisdom about relationships. But all that praise, it just reminds Lyra she's never even had a boyfriend. While they're upstairs chatting, Lost and Zeg are downstairs having their own conversation about the same thing. Zeg's straight with Lost, telling him he should go ahead and move in with Narcina. It's not like she's asking him to get married or anything, and it's obvious she's into him. Turning her down would probably sting. Zeg asks if Lost has a problem with the idea of living with Narcina, but Lost says no way. She's the reason he got back on his feet when he was at rock bottom. She even traveled to this city just to partner up with him. Hating her, that's not even in the cards. But Zeg can tell Lost is too embarrassed to admit he's into her. Back with Lyra and Narcina, the topic shifts, and Lyra starts spilling about her past. Back in the royal capital, she had a bunch of guys trying to get her attention. Some even joined her party just to be close to her. Zeg was one of them. One day, while Zeg was off somewhere, another guy got way too bold and tried to put moves on her without her say-so. Lyra wasn't having it. She knocked him out cold and dragged him outside. She was ready to let it go, but when Zeg found out, it was a wrap. He threw the guy out of the city and then disappeared himself. Lyra never knew what was going through Zeg's head back then. But at the same time, Zeg's opening up to Lost about the whole thing. He explains that he was mad at himself for not being there to protect Lyra, and after that, he didn't know how to face her. He left the royal capital and over time, ended up here on a mission, running into Lyra in this city that was the last thing he expected. And not only was she here, but she was also willing to team up with him after hearing about his mission. He couldn't believe it, especially since he thought she must have been mad at him. Thing is, Lyra was never angry at him. She was hurt that he disappeared without saying a word. Ever since then, she's been stuck wondering how Zeg really feels about her. Sheila walks into the room and cuts right to the chase, telling Lyra that if she's this worked up, she must have feelings for Zeg. Meanwhile, downstairs, Zeg apologizes to Lost for making him sit through his story. But he's not dropping the main topic and asks Lost again why he turned down Narcina's offer to live together. Lost admits he's not against the idea. Honestly, it felt good hearing her say she wanted to live with him. But before making any moves, there's something he needs to confirm. Right then, Amherst rolls into the inn, looking for Lost. She's got the investigative report he asked her to pull together. Zeg's caught off guard because he didn't know the guild offered private investigations. But Amherst explains this isn't guild business, this is something Lost hired her to do on the side. Amherst checks if it's cool to share the details with someone else at the table. Lost says it's fine. He trusts Zeg. So Amherst starts laying out her findings about Narcina. Turns out, Narcina is the only daughter of the Earl of Enelstria. Normally, she and her future husband would inherit her father's title. But one day, she dropped the bombshell that she wanted to become an adventurer. Now, nobles turning into adventurers isn't unheard of, but no parent wants their only kid signing up for a life or death job. At first, the Earl was totally against it, but then something wild happened. Narcina woke up one morning, and her hair had turned blue overnight. That's part of why Lost didn't recognize her right away. He knew her hair color had changed, but he never guessed it happened literally overnight. Nobody knows what caused it, but when it did, the Earl suddenly stopped fighting her decision to be an adventurer. Lost is scratching his head, wondering why her dad flipped his stance so quickly. Zeg throws out a theory. Maybe Narcina's got some kind of illness, and her father's letting her live her best life while she can. It's a grim thought, but Narcina doesn't look like she's on her way out. She's strong enough to knock a phoenix out of the sky, so whatever's going on, she's not showing signs of slowing down. At the end of the day, what matters is that the Earl gave his blessing for Narcina to be here. That was the thing Lost needed to know before he could decide about living with her. Lost didn't want to doubt Narcina when she said she had her father's permission to be here, but there was always that slim chance she was lying just to stick close to him. He had to be sure she had the green light from her family. After Amherst gets her payment, she bounces. She's not about to hang around for the rest of this talk. Once she's gone, Zeg asks Lost what he would have done if it turned out Narcina's dad wasn't cool with her adventuring. Lost says his first move would have been telling her to go home for a bit and try to work things out with her parents. And if that didn't work, he'd still back her up however she needed. But at least that's not something he has to worry about now. Meanwhile, upstairs, the girls are piecing together the story. Narcina's not just any adventurer, she's the daughter of an earl. Despite that she trained her heart out, left her whole life behind to follow Lost after hearing he got booted from his old party, and even had the guts to ask him to live with her. They're all blown away by how bold Narcina is with her feelings. Lyra, on the other hand, wishes she could be that brave, so the girls hatch a plan to help her out. They drag Lyra downstairs and push her into confessing to Zeg. She asks him to step outside for a private chat. Zeg has no idea what's going on, but Lyra's clearly serious, so he agrees. Out there, Lyra works up her nerve and finally asks Zeg to be her partner. Zeg's confused at first and brushes it off, saying they're already in the same party. But Lyra clears it up, she's talking about being life partners. That's when it clicks for Zeg that she's talking about romance. The girls are huddled by the door, low-key spying, waiting to hear what Zeg says. But he's completely flustered and can't give her an answer on the spot. He tells her he needs time to think about it. Lyra's disappointed, she just laid her heart out, and all she gets is "I'll think about it." But then again, she knows Zeg isn't the kind of guy who's quick with decisions like this. She figures he needs time to process and decides to be patient. The girls are thrilled things didn't fall apart between Lyra and Zeg, but just as they're celebrating, Lost turns to Narcina and asks if she's free tomorrow. He's got something important to talk to her about. Down in the labyrinth, a crew of rookie adventurers gets caught slipping and Orc spots them on one of the upper floors. They ain't got the skills to throw hands with it, so they duck and hide, hoping it'll lose interest. Lucky for them, the orc doesn't notice as it stomps through, but when they try to make a break for it, another orc pulls up and blocks their way. Right now things go from bad to worse. The first orc starts doubling back, and if they don't move fast, they'll be boxed in on both sides. But hold up, this ain't the leader's first rodeo. He's got a plan to keep the crew alive. That's where Keith comes in. See, Keith's not walking out of this one. They set him up as bait, sending him to lure the orcs while the rest of the squad dips out. Keith, poor guy's about to take one for the team. Meanwhile, back in town, Lost and the squad are posted up at breakfast. But Narcina was out of it, barely touching her food. Zeg and Lyra peep the vibe and start worrying. They figure it's cause Lost mentioned he had something important to tell her. The problem is, he didn't say what or when, so now Narcina's caught up in her head, trying to guess what's coming. Lyra gives Lost the side eye and tells him he better handle it. But he's dragging his feet, says it's a serious topic, and he doesn't want to mess it up. But if he keeps stalling, Narcina might start munching on flower arrangements or something, so he decides to go ahead and have that talk. Lost walks over and says her name. Narcina jumps up all nervous, asking what's up. Lost starts to say what's on his mind, but before he gets a word out, the inn door swings wide open. We see, against all odds, Keith somehow survived getting left behind in the labyrinth. Sheila knows him and freaks out when she sees him all banged up. She rushes over, fussing over his injuries like it's her life mission. A little later, Lost gets Keith patched up and reassures everyone the kid's going to be alright. Turns out his injuries weren't as bad as they seemed. Lyra and Sheila are tasked with looking after him for now, but folks are scratching their heads. Lyra makes sense, she's a healer. But Sheila, what's she got to do with this? Mary steps in and breaks it down for everyone. Sheila and Keith go way back. They've been tight since they were kids. Keith's a labyrinth orphan, same age as Sheila, and Mary couldn't bring herself to leave him hanging. That's why she'd always let him kick it with them at the inn, feed him, and keep him around. Over time, she got attached to the kid. She'd have gladly given him a job at the inn. But Keith had bigger dreams. He wanted to be an adventurer. Mary let him chase that, and he was all smiles when he told her he joined his first party. But look how that turned out, ditched and left for dead in the labyrinth. Lost turns to Narcina and apologizes, telling her they'll have to put their talk on hold because he's got some business to handle. He already called in a favor to deal with the scumbags who abandoned Keith. The guild stepped in and roughed them up real good for what they did. The guild even asks Lost how he wants to punish them further, but Lost decides they've been worked over enough. He tells them to let the party go, but not before making it clear they're banned from coming anywhere near the city ever again. Those cowards waste no time running off. Amherst gets why Lost brought everyone together to teach the party a lesson, but she's got rules to follow. She reminds him disputes between adventurers are supposed to go through the guild, not street justice. That rubs the crew the wrong way. They fire back, saying the guild didn't lift a finger when Keith got abandoned, and it's not like they were planning to. Amherst doesn't deny it. She knows the guild's weak when it comes to handling situations like this, but she's got her marching orders from higher ups. Right then, Handsome strolls in already heated, and starts chewing out the adventurers. He's mad they went rogue and kicked that party out on their own. But the adventurers don't back down, they clap back hard, saying he's got no business running his mouth when he didn't do a damn thing to fix the problem in the first place. Lost steps in to cool everyone off and says he'll handle it. He sits down with Handsome and lays it all out. Handsome's still not thrilled about how things went down, but after hearing the whole story, he gets why they acted the way they did. Lost presses him, asking why the guild isn't doing anything to prevent this mess from happening again. Other cities have policies to protect labyrinth orphans from being treated as throwaways or bait. Why doesn't this city have something in place? Handsome fires back with a straight-up question. Do you think any of those fancy policies would hold weight down in the labyrinth? Cities can write all the rules they want, but if they don't change anything on the ground, what's the point of wasting time and cash? Lost shoots back, asking if Handsome's just gonna leave all the labyrinth orphans to be used as bait. But Handsome sets him straight. He says Lost's got it twisted. He's been clear from the jump anyone who doesn't like how this city runs can pack up and bounce. It's not because he's against complaints though. Handsome believes adventuring isn't for everybody. If someone can't handle the grind, they don't belong out here. The guild isn't forcing anyone to pick this life, and that includes Keith. If Keith couldn't handle the risks, he should have chosen a different hustle. Lost wants to tell Handsome he's out of pocket, but deep down he gets it. Still, he's not ready to give up on finding a way to help the labyrinth orphans. There's gotta be something they can do. Handsome stands up and hits him with something from back in the day. He says an adventurer who ain't competent is as good as dead. You gotta be ready for that from the start. Then he reminds Lost that it was him who said that to him years ago. To make it stick, Handsome shows Lost a scar proof from their early days together. Back then, when Lost was still green, he and Handsome got roped into being pack mules for a crew of adventurers. Handsome caught the worst of it, and Lost offered to help carry some of his load to ease the weight. But Handsome wasn't having it. He didn't want pity, especially not from someone he saw as dead weight. Told Lost to keep quiet and mind his business. That night, while the rest of the party was warm and cozy by the fire, Handsome sat out in the cold, hating the job and wishing he'd never taken it even if it paid all right. Hours later, when the camp was dead quiet, Lost woke him up. He warned him that a pack of goblins was creeping up on them. He told Handsome to wake the others while he stayed on watch a little longer. Handsome didn't argue, he got the crew up, and Lost filled them all in on the danger closing in. The crew can't believe what Lost is saying, so they press him asking if he's sure about what he saw. But Lost doesn't waver, he knows what he saw, and it's bad. A massive horde of goblins is closing in, too many to count. When the group sees it with their own eyes, they're shook. There's no way they can take on a swarm that big. The only shot they've got is to run, but the leader thinks making a break for it right now is too dangerous. To buy time, he and the rest of the party come up with a grim plan: use Lost and Handsome as bait to draw the goblins away while they escape. Before Handsome can figure out what's happening, both he and Lost get tossed off the side of a cliff and left behind. Handsome yells for help, but Lost cuts him off, saying those traitors aren't coming back. In fact, Lost figures this is probably why they brought incompetents like him and Handsome in the first place, so they'd have throwaways to use when things went south. The betrayal makes Handsome furious, but he knows anger won't get them out of this mess. He and Lost make a pact to survive and settle the score with that crew later. The two fight off goblins as long as they can, but the odds are impossible. There's no winning against a swarm that size, so they take cover climbing up into a massive tree to hide for a bit. While they're laying low, Handsome starts losing hope. He can't stand the idea that the others are going to make it out alive after sacrificing him and Lost. But then Lost drops some lesser-known goblin lore. Goblins tend to go after bigger groups. If the horde spots the party, they'll abandon everything else to swarm them. Right on cue, the goblins pick up on the party's trail. In seconds, the horde shifts direction and rushes after them. From their hiding spot, Lost and Handsome hear the chaos as the goblins tear into the party. While those backstabbers are getting massacred, Lost and Handsome slip away unnoticed. Handsome thinks those cowards deserve what they got, but Lost, always the soft heart, wishes he could have saved them. Not that it matters, there's no way he could have done anything. He tells Handsome it's time to head back to town. Handsome starts to follow, but out of nowhere, he drops to the ground groaning in pain. Turns out, he's got a nasty wound on his arm from fighting the goblins, and now it's catching up to him. Lost is stunned and asks why Handsome didn't say anything about his injury earlier. Handsome tells him he didn't want to slow them down when they were already in a fight for their lives. Lost tries to start healing him, but Handsome snaps, telling him to stop before he brings the goblins back down on them. Angry and in pain, Handsome tells Lost to leave him behind. He says it's his own fault for being weak, and someone as useless as him doesn't deserve to live. But Lost fires back, yelling that he's dead wrong. He tells Handsome the world might be cruel to people who fall short, but there's always a shot at redemption. That's all Handsome needed to hear. The two of them push through, working together to fight past the goblins' defenses and make it back to the city. For Handsome, Lost was the hope he didn't think he'd find. But what Lost said stuck with him. The world is hard on the weak. That day, though, the real incompetents weren't them. It was the adventurers who ditched them without even knowing how goblins act in a swarm. Once they made it back to the city, Lost and Handsome went their separate ways. Handsome eventually crossed paths with an elder who took him in and taught him what it meant to be a true adventurer. Over time, Handsome grew strong and capable, standing on his own 2 feet. That elder turned out to be none other than Mist, the guild master, which explains how Handsome became a guild employee and the master's right-hand man. But Handsome didn't bring all this up to relive the old days. He's got a debt to Lost for saving his life, and now he wants to pay it back. He warns Lost to get out of the city, not as a threat, but as a heads up. Something big is about to go down, and Handsome doesn't want Lost caught in the fallout. Lost doesn't quite understand what Handsome is getting at, but he leaves the office anyway. When he gets back to the other adventurers, he tells them Handsome isn't budging on his stance. That's when Amherst pulls Lost aside and drops some surprising news. Turns out, there's a lot of folks around who don't back how the guild master is running things, and that's why Amherst has a personal favor to ask Lost. Later that day, Lost heads over to Narcina and breaks down the request Amherst hit him with. Apparently, a bunch of monsters have been popping up on the roads near the city, and Amherst wants Lost to handle it before anyone innocent gets hurt. Narcina gets it, but she's wondering why the guild hasn't put up a bounty on those monsters yet. Turns out, getting a bounty approved needs Handsome's signature, and that's just not gonna happen. Plus, the city's crawling with shady adventurers causing trouble. Lost offers to help clean that mess up too. Narcina sees what he's trying to do, and yes, it's a good thing, but it sounds like way too much work for them. Lost tells her not to stress, though Amherst said she'd throw in bonus pay for taking care of the monsters on the road. The thing is, since this mission's not guild approved, she's gotta pay out of her own pocket. She's not exactly thrilled about it, but she feels like it's only fair since Lost is going out of his way to help her out. Later on, Handsome rolls up to the guild master with a letter straight from the Prime Minister. The letter's basically a heads up, telling the guild to keep tabs on Narcina. Handsome's confused though. Why would someone like Narcina matter enough for the Prime Minister to be checking in on her? He asks Mist what's up, and Mist starts talking about that old story, the one about the evil dragon and the sleeping princess. It's a famous fairy tale around here, where the princess sacrifices herself to take down the dragon. But Mist lets Handsome in on the real deal. It's not just a story, it's a prophecy. And the sign that someone's been picked by the gods to step up as the sleeping princess. They suddenly get blue hair, which sounds just like Narcina. Lost and his crew are posted up outside the town when they run into a pack of monsters. Narcina's quick to point out that these creatures are moving exactly how Amherst warned them they would. That means these must be the regular troublemakers in this area. Now they're trying to figure out their move. Lyra suggests setting up an ambush since they're already on the way to town. Army is thinking they could hit them from a distance using magic, but Lost ain't about that life. He's all for going in head on, saying he wants every single one of them wiped out. Armia sees his point, though if they keep their distance, some of those monsters might slip away. Then Zeg comes in with a smart plan: sneak up on the monsters from downwind. Lost is feeling that idea, so that's what they roll with. As they move, they spot this old busted up carriage, yes, the same one from years ago when Narcina got attacked. Shows you how slack the town's been about cleaning up their mess. Before they can even blink, the monsters come at them. Everybody jumps in fighting as a squad. Narcina's thinking about how all she did back then was cry, but now she's a whole new person. Lost is out here handling business too, remembering how last time these things had him on the ropes, even when he gave it everything he had. But now they're all fighting together, keeping that promise they made. After a tough battle, they take out every last one of those monsters. But right when they think it's all good, an earthquake hits, shaking up the whole area including their town. There's some damage, sure, but the townsfolk are alright. Mist is standing there saying it's finally begun. Lost and the crew head back to Mary, relieved to see everyone there is safe. That's when this adventurer shows up in a rush, telling Lost that Marnell's asking for him. Lost is thinking something might have gone down at the guild, but the guy says Marnell isn't there. He's waiting for Lost at the town's entrance. So they head over, and Marnell points out a group of goblins camped out near the gate. Narcina's shocked. How are there still this many left after the beating they just handed out? And these goblins brought hobgoblins with them too. Lost pieces it together. These creatures are gearing up to attack the town. Lost's gut is telling him this ain't good. The town's still a mess from the quake earlier, and now they've got more trouble brewing. Marnell's on the same page, saying they've got to shut these goblins down right here and now. But he's real about it. Taking on this crew won't be easy. Marnell explains that's why he called for Lost, but since they don't have any deal with the guild, there's no paycheck waiting for this job. He's cool if Lost decides to walk, but Lost and his crew are down to help anyway, so they square up against the goblins. Armia's throwing out magic blasts, lighting them up. Zeg's swinging his blade, slicing through like it's nothing. Lost is out here taking on the hobgoblins, managing to cut off one of their arms. That move catches the hobgoblin off guard. It's so shook, it starts talking, cussing out Lost and swearing revenge. Then the rest of the goblins are hyped up, saying they're gonna kill everybody. The adventurers are stunned. Monsters talking. That's not something they've seen before. Marnell's scratching his head, wondering what's going on. Even Zeg, who's got a rep in these streets, has never heard of anything like this. Lost figures they can think about that weirdness later. Right now, the mission's clear: take these monsters out and protect the town. Marnell rallies his crew, telling them to shake off the fear and fight like they always do. Fired up, everyone dives back into the battle. When it's all over, that hobgoblin, still bitter about losing, starts running his mouth again, claiming humans are doomed and the war is far from over. But before he can finish, he's the one who drops dead. Lost spots a magic crystal on the hobgoblin and realizes this thing was mutated. But the whole talking monster angle, that's a tough one to wrap his head around. Then, John Wick shows up, warning them they've got even bigger problem. They look out and see a swarm of monsters pouring out of the labyrinth, way more than they just fought. It's looking like 3 times as many, and they just keep coming. Zeg shook, wondering how they're supposed to handle this. Lost knows they can't win this round, so he calls for a retreat for now. Narcina wonders what's next, and it's revealed that the plan is to join forces with other adventurers in Marmont and take those monsters down hard, turning them into meatballs. Just when things seem clear, he notices a huge crowd outside the Adventurers Guild. Curious about what's happening, he finds out a bounty has been posted on the monsters that escaped the labyrinth, and the reward is massive. That explains why the crowd is so big. Even Amherst thinks the payout is wild, and on top of that, they're offering advance payments in some cases. This has led to some adventurers running off with the cash, and Narcina figures they should stop giving advances if they know it's causing problems. Lost realizes this must be Handsome's doing, and Amherst backs him up. Marnell asks Lost what the plan is now since things aren't going as expected. Even though the situation is messy, it does get the adventurers to band together to defend the town from the monsters. Zeg wonders if Handsome is stirring the pot on purpose, and while Lost isn't sure, he suspects this might have been in the works for a while. After all, if Handsome can drop this much gold so quickly, he's probably been planning ahead. Relma points out it feels like they were expecting this, and the group is surprised to see her since they thought she'd already left. Lost asks if she saw this coming too, but Relma isn't sure what he means. Lost explains it's about the monsters pouring out of the labyrinth, something called a labyrinth uprising. Amherst remembers hearing about it before and shows them a book with details. She explains that a labyrinth uprising is when a swarm of monsters spills out all at once. Most times it settles down within a day, but sometimes it can drag on for days. When there's a town or village nearby, the monsters usually overrun it, leaving destruction in their wake. It happens because of a buildup of magic power in the labyrinth. The only way to stop it is to take out all the monsters, forcing the labyrinth to burn through its magic to create more. Amherst explains that adventurer guilds exist to manage the buildup of magic in labyrinths, and Lyra wonders how she could have forgotten such an important historical fact. Amherst assures her it's understandable to forget since this is something they only cover during training, and she's never encountered it in real life. Ralma adds that it's because there hasn't been a labyrinth uprising in the past 100 years. This shows the guild has been doing its job, even if the staff weren't fully aware of it. Still, Ralma feels 100 years isn't long enough for something like this to be forgotten. She's sure at least one of them has heard a story about their great-grandfather surviving a labyrinth uprising. Experienced adventurers especially should know about it. Zeg agrees, and Marnell comments that it's strange for an uprising to happen in their labyrinth. Lost agrees with him, explaining that Marmot attracts the most adventurers in the area, so more monsters are being defeated in the labyrinth. But even with all that activity, so much magic has built up that it triggered an uprising. Ralma knows Lost is right, but the fact remains that an uprising is happening now, and she wonders how they're going to handle it. The scene shifts to the adventurers in town building a barricade. Narcina asks Lost if all of this is really necessary. Lost reminds her that an uprising can last for days, and if that's what they're dealing with, the adventurers will be overwhelmed no matter how much they prepare, so they might as well do everything they can now. Suddenly, the monsters break into the town. The adventurers, motivated by the money they'll earn, jump into action and block the monsters' escape route with carriages. They launch a coordinated attack, but Lost quickly realizes there are already mid-level monsters roaming the town. Ralma notices Lost is probably blaming himself for letting so many monsters in. She tells him to drop that bad habit, reminding him that nobody here, including herself, has ever dealt with a labyrinth uprising before. Marnell tells Lost to focus on fighting instead of beating himself up, and he nods in agreement. Then we see liches flying in the sky. Lyra is shocked they're not only out in broad daylight, but they're also speaking. Zeg figures they might have mutated too, and all the monsters seem hell-bent on wiping out the humans. Ralma steps up, launching her signature fireball attack, giving the others the cover they need to charge at the monsters. After some time though, Ralma gets exhausted and decides to take a break. Lost warns her there are still plenty of monsters left, and reinforcements haven't arrived yet. Just as more monsters pour into the area, Narcina asks Ralma to keep providing cover, but Ralma can't keep going. Zeg and Lost step up to handle the monsters themselves, tearing through them one after the other. In the middle of the chaos, Zeg slips on something, leaving himself wide open to a monster's attack. But Ronaldo makes a dramatic entrance, taking out the monsters nearby and saving Zeg just in time. Ronaldo looks around and is relieved to see Narcina and Lost holding their ground. Lyra, surprised, asks how Ronaldo knows them. Narcina explains that Ronaldo once trained her in swordsmanship. Ronaldo humbly says he only gave her a few lessons since martial arts were always her strength. Still, Ronaldo can't resist pointing out that Narcina was better at it than Lost, calling him incompetent. Lost defends himself, admitting he also trained under Ronaldo. Lyra is surprised to learn that Zeg and Lost trained under the same master. Ronaldo says he'd love to stay and talk more, but right now dealing with the monsters is the top priority. Without wasting time, Ronaldo dives into the fight, cutting through the monsters like they're nothing. Watching him, Marnell can't help but ask, who is this guy? Ralma explains that Ronaldo is an exceptional swordsman, and they used to go on adventures together back when Lost was training with them. Just then, Handsome shows up through some kind of portal. He tells Ralma that Mist wants to see her. Ralma is stunned by the spell Handsome used. It's supposed to be an ancient one, and suddenly everything clicks. That's why she couldn't track Mist down until now. Ralma decides to go with Handsome, figuring Ronaldo can handle things here. Lost asks to tag along since he has some questions for the guild branch manager. Handsome agrees, saying Mist invited Lost and Narcina too. The four of them step into the portal, and before they know it, they're teleported to a hallway. On the way, Narcina wonders aloud why Handsome asked her to come. Lost doesn't have an answer, but reassures her not to worry, he's got her back. Ralma, however, cuts in, warning Lost that there's no way he can take on Mist. She admits even she doesn't stand a chance against that old ugly geezer and tells Lost not to try anything reckless. Finally, they come face to face with Mist. Seeing his face instantly ticks Ralma off, and she hurls a fireball at him, but it does nothing to the invincible Santa Claus. That's when they notice something surprising. Mist isn't just an old man, he's actually an elf. Ralma explains that Mist belongs to a race that failed to gain the favor of the Supreme and might even be the last one of his kind. Mist just chuckles, saying Ralma hasn't changed one bit. He asks if this is how she greets her master, and that's when it hits Lost Ralma is this guy's disciple. Lost and Narcina are tripping after finding out someone as powerful as Ralma takes orders from somebody else. Ralma clears it up, saying her boss Mist ain't just stronger than her, he's in a whole different league. Now, the elves are already crazy good with magic, but Mist's on another level. The dude's been around for over 600 years, picking up every spell under the sun. While Ralma's explaining, Mist is locked in on Narcina with this deep stare that's starting to mess with her nerves. Ralma steps in, asking Mist what's up. Why'd he call them here? She hasn't seen him in years, and now that she's found him in this town, he's been dodging her left and right. She figures this ain't some friendly catch-up. Mist doesn't deny it. He's got something big to lay down, but it's gonna take a while. With a quick wave of his hand, he magics up some chairs so everyone can settle in. Before he gets going, Ralma presses him, asking if all this was part of his grand scheme. She accuses him of letting shady adventurers run wild in the city while turning a blind eye to their crimes, all to set them up for some battle against the rampage. And Handsome kept kicking people out of town for petty reasons, making sure the decent adventurers stayed clean. Ralma figures Mist must have seen the rampage coming way before it hit. Mist doesn't argue. He says it was obvious to anyone paying attention. Monsters were getting stronger in the upper levels, evolving faster than usual. It was all pointing to something big going down. Narcina isn't buying it though. If Mist knew, why didn't he warn people? Handsome jumps in, saying a warning wouldn't have helped. They didn't know if the rampage was coming tomorrow, next week, or years later. A vague heads up wouldn't have changed a thing about the town's defenses. Ralma isn't convinced. She thinks there's gotta be a bigger reason Mist kept quiet. Maybe he even caused the rampage himself. But Mist shakes that off, saying even if he had the power to control the labyrinth, there's no way he'd create that kind of headache for himself. Turns out, the order to keep the rampage under wraps didn't come from him. It came straight from his boss, the head honcho of every adventurer's guild in the whole country. Here's the deal: rampages are brutal. They can last for days and take out whole cities easily. But since this one isn't anywhere near the royal capital, the bigwigs up top decided it wasn't their problem. Instead of warning everyone, they kept it under wraps, figuring that stirring up panic across the country wasn't worth it. But that left Marmot and the nearby cities to fend for themselves. Mist wasn't about to let that slide though. He made his own moves to fight back against the rampage. He asks Lost and Narcina if they remember all those towers popping up around town. Those are part of his last-ditch plan if everything else goes south. Before using that though, Mist wants to fight with everything they've got. He asks Ralma to step up and help hold the line against the monsters. No matter how fired up the adventurers outside are right now, they're only human, they'll need breaks. The thing is, Mist's backup plan runs on a massive amount of magic, and he needs Ralma to power it up. With no other options, Ralma agrees, even though it means putting herself on the line as a living battery. But before she jumps in, she asks Mist if he's willing to risk his neck too. Mist doesn't hesitate, he's all in. He and Handsome plan to head straight to the bottom of the labyrinth. Narcina's thrown off by this because as far as she knows, nobody's even found the bottom of the labyrinth yet. But Mist explains that thanks to some reports he's pieced together, he's got a pretty good idea where the final boss is hanging out. Lost thinks the whole thing is nuts, but Mist lays it out. If he and Handsome can take down the Labyrinth Master, it'll cut off the mana fueling the rampage. That means the chaos will end way sooner. Hearing this, Ralma doubles down on her promise to hold off the rampage until Mist can finish the job. Meanwhile, outside the city, the fight isn't letting up. Thanks to Ronaldo and the monsters haven't busted through yet. But then a horde of orcs rolls in, and Zeg gets worried they're gonna break the defenses. He steps up, asking Ronaldo to charge at them with him. The two dive into the fight, holding the line as hard as they can. Back at the guild courtyard, Ralma and the others stick to the plan. Ralma finds the device Mist mentioned, places her hand on it, and a hidden door swings open. Ralma pulls Lost aside and gives him a heads up before heading out. She warns him straight Mist might be helping now, but he's not someone you can trust fully. She tells Lost to keep his eyes open while she's gone, then says her goodbyes and steps into the device, sealing the door behind her. As soon as the device powers up, a blinding light shoots out, and a massive barrier wraps itself around the whole city. The adventurers near the gate don't know what's up with the barrier, but they're quick to use it to their advantage, running back into the city for cover. Lucky for them, the orcs can't bust through the barrier anytime soon, so they focus on taking out the monsters that slipped in before it activated. Over on the battlefield, Zeg and Ronaldo have just finished taking down the last orc. Ronaldo tells Zeg to fall back and rest, but Zeg tries to brush it off, saying he can keep going. Ronaldo isn't buying it, though he can see Zeg's out of breath. If Zeg keeps pushing himself, he'll mess up. Besides, there are enough adventurers left to handle what's inside. For now, they've got the barrier to thank for keeping the worst of the monsters out. That's when Lost and Narcina roll up and fill everyone in on what's really going down, how Ralma is using her own magic to power the barrier and risking her life in the process. The barrier's huge, and that means it's chewing through Ralma's mana like crazy. Even though she's got a deep reserve of magic, it's not bottomless. Eventually, she'll run out. Normally, running out of mana would knock her out cold, but this device she's inside doesn't stop there. It keeps pulling magic from her, even past the point of exhaustion. If the barrier's still active when she's drained dry, she's not gonna make it. As they're taking all this in, a new problem lands on their plate. A griffin shows up. This beast is no joke. Under normal circumstances, no amount of teamwork would be enough to take it down, but they're lucky the barrier keeps it out of the city. Still, the Griffin's presence isn't something they can ignore. The barrier is powered by elf tech, so it's strong enough to block the Griffin's attacks. But every hit forces the barrier to pull more mana from Ralma to repair itself. If they let the Griffin keep hammering away, it won't be long before Ralma's mana runs dry, and then it's game over for her. Lost isn't about to let that happen. He makes a move to take on the Griffin himself. But before he can, Ronaldo steps in and tells him he doesn't have to do this alone. They're all in this together, and Ralma means too much to let her go down. The crew sprints out past the barrier, heading straight into the chaos where goblins and orcs are swarming. But the real problem that Griffin hammering the barrier non-stop. Ronaldo tells the team to handle the orcs fast so they can focus on the big threat. They start clearing out the smaller monsters, cutting them down left and right. But then, the goblins suddenly back off. Turns out, they've figured out they're outmatched, so they call in reinforcements of Fenrir. Narcina's never seen one before, but even from a distance, she knows it's bad news. Lost confirms it. Fenrirs are lightning fast on the ground and pack the same kind of power as a griffin. Beating it won't be easy. Ronaldo turns to Lost and asks if he can handle the Fenrir solo since someone still needs to deal with the griffin. Lost says he's got it, so Ronaldo heads off to take down the griffin, leaving the rest of the crew to face the Fenrir. Armia is the first to make a move. She fires off a blazing fireball, but the Fenrir's too quick. It zips past her attack and charges right at her. Before it can land a hit, Lost jumps in and blocks its attack. His speed matches the Fenrir's, and everyone's impressed he can keep up with the beast. Even so, it's not enough. Lost is doing all he can to hold his ground, but he's stuck playing defense. Eventually, the Fenrir finds an opening and slashes his arm. The wound's too bad for Lost to keep fighting. Zeg steps up, taking on the Fenrir alongside Armia, while Lyra and Narcina work on patching Lost up. Lost tries to brush them off, saying he's fine, but it's obvious he's not. Lyra takes one look at his arm and says it's barely holding on. She can heal him, but it'll take time. For now, he's benched. Meanwhile, the Griffin lines up for another attack on the barrier, but Ronaldo's already waiting for it. Perched high on a tower, he leaps off just as the Griffin swoops in and slams it into the ground. The Griffin's not dead, but Ronaldo's crushed its wing grounding it. Now that it can't fly, taking it down is going to be a whole lot easier. Back with the Fenrir, Zeg and Armia are doing everything they can to keep it occupied. But the Fenrir's no fool, it figures out Armia's the easier target. It lets out a bone-chilling howl and summons a lick to go after her. Armia doesn't see it coming and gets knocked out cold. Seeing her down messes with Zeg's focus, and the Fenrir takes him out right after. But the Fenrir ain't worried about finishing Zeg off. It's got its sights set on Lost. It charges straight for Lyra, cutting her off before she can heal him, and then grabs Lost like a rag doll, tossing his limp body around. That's when Narcina snaps. Seeing Lost hurt like that sends her into a rage. She charges at the Fenrir, screaming that it's gonna pay for what it did. She goes toe-to-toe with the beast and even lands a nasty kick that sends it flying. But the Fenrir ain't done. It shakes it off, comes back swinging, and gets serious. It slashes Narcina's arm, and she drops to the ground, bleeding and looking like she's out of the fight. The Fenrir stands over her, acting like it's already won. Then Narcina smirks. Turns out it was all a setup. She was playing bait. In the blink of an eye, Lost springs up behind the Fenrir, his arm healed just enough to move and drives a dagger deep into its neck. Earlier, when Narcina saw Lost lying there, she realized he wasn't knocked out for real, he was faking it while healing himself. So she drew the Fenrir's attention, giving Lost the opening he needed for a sneak attack. With that final blow, the Fenrir goes down for good. Narcina's injuries finally catch up to her, and she passes out. When she wakes up, she's back inside the barrier. Her body feels fine, which surprises her. But then again, with Lost around, she figures it'd be weirder if he hadn't healed her. She asks about the Griffin, and Ronaldo casually pulls out its magic gem. He says its handled Griffin's done for. With the biggest threats out of the way, Ralma should be able to hold the barrier a bit longer. But if Ralma's gonna survive, Mist and Handsome need to pull through and take out the Labyrinth Master like they promised. For now, there's nothing more they can do, so Lost suggests heading back to the inn to rest up. Out of nowhere, though, Handsome shows up behind Narcina. He doesn't look happy and straight up says he expected her to die in that fight. Before anyone can react, he grabs her and drags her into a portal, planning to finish what the Fenrir couldn't. Marnell and the crew had just finished taking down the last of those beasts wrecking the town. With the barrier holding strong, it seemed like folks could breathe easy for now. Keith and the other kids showed up with some food, telling the adventurers to kick back for a while since the place was safe again. Marnell appreciated the gesture, but he couldn't chill. His mind was locked on Lost and the rest of the squad. That's when Sheila stepped in, letting him know Lost was already back at the inn resting up. Marnell felt a wave of relief and asked if that meant everyone got out okay. Sadly, not all the news was good. Lost and the others made it, but Narcina wasn't so lucky. Over at the inn, the team was trying to figure out their next steps and piece together why Handsome had snatched Narcina. Ronaldo thought he had the answer. Narcina was the sleeping princess. Armia wasn't buying it at first. To her, that tale was nothing more than a bedtime story. But Ronaldo pointed out that, while parts of it might have been stretched, the story was rooted in truth. The legend says the sleeping princess has the power to put the evil dragon into a deep slumber, but at the cost of her own life. That's why Handsome probably grabbed her to serve her up to the dragon. Meanwhile, Handsome had returned to Mist's rune with Narcina in tow. Mist gave him props for the successful capture, but things heated up fast. As soon as Narcina realized Mist was the mastermind behind her abduction, she lunged straight at him. But Mist wasn't some rookie. He'd been around the block and mastered every type of magic there was. With a flick of his power, he froze Narcina mid-air and brought her crashing down to her knees. She demanded to know what he planned to do with her, but Mist dodged the question. Instead, he asked if she knew about the evil dragon. Narcina thought he was messing with her after all. Who hadn't heard of that beast? But Mist wasn't joking. He let her go and told her to explain what she knew. Narcina recounted the tale. A terrifying dragon showed up 200 years ago, and a hero rose out of nowhere to take it down. Mist nodded but corrected her. The hero didn't kill the dragon, he only managed to send it back to its realm, and that dragon hadn't only shown up 200 years ago. It had been wreaking havoc every 200 years, 400, 600, and even 800 years ago. The dragon's cycle of showing up rolls around every 200 years, and every single time so far some heroes stepped up, beat it back, and made it retreat to heal and plan its next move. Now it's been 200 years since the last beatdown, which means the dragon's about to make its return. Narcina picks up on how bad this is and wonders if the hero will show up again to stop it. Mist breaks it down for her. It's not happening this time. Normally the hero shows up the same moment the dragon comes back to life. But this time, no hero has appeared yet. That said, even without a hero in sight, there is someone who can handle this situation, Narcina herself. The proof, her blue hair. That's the sign that she's the sleeping princess. Turns out, when the maiden is chosen, her hair changes to blue. Narcina starts wondering if her father knew about all this. It's hard to believe a guy with his kind of power wouldn't know something so major. That's probably why he let her hit the road as an adventurer in the first place. Back at the inn, Lost asks Ronaldo if Mist's planning to use Narcina to handle the dragon. Ronaldo doesn't think Mist is calling the shots though. The decision most likely came from his boss, the Chancellor of the Adventurers Guild. All he cares about is cutting down the damage the dragon causes no matter what the cost. Armia doesn't see that as such a bad thing, but Ronaldo breaks it down further. The Chancellor's goal isn't to stop the dragon entirely, he's just looking to control the fallout. For instance, if he had to sacrifice 30 people to save 60, he'd do it without a second thought. Take this city for example. It doesn't even have walls because the Chancellor refused to approve building them. With the dragon's return on the horizon, those labyrinth stampedes are bound to happen, and the Chancellor knew this. He's planning to let Marmot get wiped out by a stampede as part of some twisted strategy. If a whole city gets destroyed, it'll force everyone from regular folks to the king to wake up to the seriousness of the situation. That way the Chancellor can grab full control and do whatever needs to be done to take the dragon down. Narcina can't believe the Chancellor's ready to let everyone in Marmot get wiped out. But he's convinced it's the only way to save the world. Every time that dragon pops up, it's in a different labyrinth. But Guild, studying the flow of mana and the labyrinth patterns, figured out it'd show up here, and they've been sitting on this info for decades. Ronaldo tells the group the same thing, but Zeg can't wrap his head around why, if they've known this for so long, they didn't warn the people in town about the danger coming their way. It's obvious now the Chancellor was planning to let Marmot's folks die. Mist, though, wasn't down with that plan. He pulled out all the stops and secretly threw up a barrier around Marmot to protect it without the Chancellor catching wind. But the Stampede's chaos isn't slowing down, and if it keeps up, Ralma's life is on the line. Mist knows this, and he's going all out to take down the labyrinth boss fast. As a backup plan, he had Handsome snatch Narcina, thinking she could be the key to stopping the dragon if his mission falls through. Ronaldo can't really know what's running through Mist's head without talking to him directly, but tracking him down is the problem. Nobody's even sure where Mist's at right now. What they do know is he's after the labyrinth boss, which means he's heading to the deepest part of the maze. That's where they'll probably find him. The labyrinth's still unexplored in parts, so this mission's no walk in the park. It's dangerous territory, and Ronaldo wants everyone to be on the same page before diving in. Lost doesn't hesitate, he's doing whatever it takes to save Narcina. The rest of the group's got love for her too, so they all agree to head down and rescue her. Meanwhile, Mist, Narcina, and Handsome step onto a magic circle in Mist's office, and boom, they're teleported into a wide open space deep in the labyrinth. At the same time, Lost and the crew enter the labyrinth, but they're shocked when they don't run into any monsters right away. Turns out, most of the monsters were pushed out by the stampede, but that won't last, new ones will start popping up soon, so they've got to move fast. On Narcina's end, the clock's ticking. As they move deeper into the labyrinth, they come across a massive Cyclops. Monsters like that are on a whole other level, and Narcina can't help but wonder what kind of place would have creatures like this roaming around. Mist explains that they're on the deepest floor of the labyrinth, and up ahead is the temple where the dungeon boss is. Narcina's shocked because she thought this place hadn't been discovered yet. Mist admits it's only because he kept it under wraps on purpose. The only ones who've ever been here are Mist, Handsome, and now Narcina. Add Lost to the list, since he tracked Narcina all the way here. As soon as he spots her, he yells her name. But his shout catches the attention of the Cyclops in the area. The Cyclops block Lost's path and try to attack. But even though they're crazy strong, Lost moves faster than them. He slices off one of the Cyclops' arms, then takes out the rest like it's nothing. His eyes are glowing red the whole time. But when the last Cyclops drops, he calms down and reassures everyone he's fine. Lost then faces off with Mist, but Mist seems weirdly happy about it and tells Lost he's glad he made it in time. Without a fight, he hands Narcina over, which makes Lost suspicious. He straight up asks if Mist is trying to pull something. Mist says he doesn't agree with the Chancellor's ways and wants to keep as many people alive as possible. Ronaldo and Zeg aren't buying it, pointing out that Mist still set up plans that put Ralma, Narcina, and even innocent adventurers in danger. Mist fires back, saying nobody's died yet, and if they can take down the Labyrinth boss fast enough, nobody has to. But for this plan to work, Lost has to be the one to defeat the boss. Mist says he'll do what he can to help. But since elves aren't favored by the gods, this world belongs to humans, so it's only right that humans are the ones to save it. Mist might be strong, but he's running out of time himself. He makes it clear they can't depend on him to win this fight for them. Since there's no other way, everybody agrees to take on the boss. On the way to the temple, Lyra pulls Zeg aside and asks if they should really trust a guy like Mist. Even Lost isn't fully convinced Mist can be trusted. But if what Mist said checks out, beating the boss could be their shot at saving everyone. When they finally make it to the boss temple, Mist turns around and lays down some more details about the dragon and the labyrinth stampede. When the hero beats the dragon, it's forced into a deep sleep in another realm. Waking it back up takes a massive amount of magic, and that power is built up by the monsters running wild in the labyrinth. The job of the labyrinth boss is to gather all that magic and deliver it to the dragon to bring it back. That means if they take out the labyrinth boss, the stampede stops, and the dragon stays asleep at least for now. But that doesn't fix the bigger issue. Even if they shut down the mana flow here, the dragon will just try to use another labyrinth later. Beating the boss buys them time, though time to figure out a real plan before the dragon makes another move. Mist steps up to the temple gate and slams his staff into the ground, calling out the labyrinth boss, the siren. As soon as it shows up, Mist tells everyone to hit it with everything they've got. Without wasting a second, they all rush in to attack. Armia casts a spell to trap the siren in place while Ronaldo and Zeg leap into the air, slicing off its wings with their swords. So far they're holding their own, but the siren fires off a wave of energy blasts at the group to push them back. Right then, Narcina leaps in and lands a powerful punch, smashing the siren's face. The hit is so strong that the siren panics and starts trying to escape. Before Siren could make its escape, Lost showed up and cut it clean in half, officially taking down the labyrinth boss. This should have been their big win, but things took a dark turn fast. Out of nowhere, Handsome got stabbed in the back by Dark Tendril, and they all heard the evil dragon's voice echoing through a portal. Turns out, the dragon had already gathered enough mana to partially manifest through that portal. It locked eyes on Mist right away, recognizing him from their past encounters. The dragon was furious, seeing Mist getting in its way again, and this time it wasn't about to let anyone mess up its plans. It demanded Mist surrender his body, threatening to kill Handsome right there if he refused. Mist knew handing over his body would spell doom for the entire world. As much as he hated it, he realized he'd have to let Handsome die and use everything he had to seal the portal. But Mist hesitated. He didn't want to let Handsome go like that. That brief pause was all the dragon needed. It forcefully took control of Mist's body, turning him into a vessel to power the portal and transfer its full strength. There wasn't enough mana left in the labyrinth for the dragon to fully manifest, so it teleported itself away to find a stronger power source. With the dragon gone, Handsome was released and collapsed to the ground. Lost rushed to his side, trying to heal the massive wound in his back. Handsome stopped him, saying there wasn't time to waste on healing him. He urged Lost to go after the dragon, warning them about the destruction it could unleash if they didn't stop it. Meanwhile, the dragon appeared on the outskirts of the city, hungry to break through. It started unleashing powerful magic against the barrier protecting the city, and it was clear Ralma couldn't hold out much longer under the strain. The evil dragon keeps hammering away at the barrier, thinking it's stubborn for holding up this long, but Ralma is barely hanging on. She's struggling to keep it together, frustrated that her master was supposed to take down the labyrinth boss, not end up possessed by the dragon. She always thought Mist was a terrible master, but she never expected him to throw her into a situation this bad. As much as she dislikes admitting it, Ralma knows she's not all that different from him. She decides to trust Lost to handle things. Meanwhile, the dragon feeds off the fear and anguish of the townsfolk, channeling it into its real body. Suddenly, the ground shakes as the city starts to quake. Lost realizes what's happening. It's the second wave of the labyrinth uprising. Monsters are charging toward the city, intent on destroying anything and anyone in their path. Marnell and the other adventurers get the news about the incoming monsters. Marnell, caught off guard, wonders how many they're dealing with. The informant tells him there are even more monsters now than during the first wave. Keith asks if the monsters have broken through again. Marnell reassures him it's not a huge problem since the wall should keep the monsters out of the city. But Keith points out the downside: they won't be able to escape if they end up surrounded. Sheila cuts to the chase, asking how long the wall can hold. Marnell doesn't have an answer. Outside the city, the monsters are already attacking the wall, piling even more pressure onto Ralma. Ronaldo sees how much she's struggling and knows she can't hold on much longer if this keeps up. Lost, instead of chasing the dragon, is focused on healing Handsome. Ronaldo walks over, asking how Handsome's doing. Lost explains that Handsome was hit by concentrated mana, the kind that's tough to heal, especially since the dragon hasn't fully manifested yet. Handsome stops Lost from trying to heal him, telling him to forgive Mist. Lost brushes it off, saying that's not important right now. But Handsome keeps going, saying he owes Mist everything. He's sure Lost understands what it's like to grow up as a labyrinth orphan since he's one too. Handsome starts talking about how they were treated. There was no place for them in town, nobody cared, and everyone tried to use them like disposable tools. Mist was the only one who was different. He taught Handsome everything he knows. When he was nothing but a clueless kid, Mist gave him the skills to survive in this harsh world. Handsome realizes Mist had been using him as a front to stay hidden and protect his secret as an elf. Even knowing this, Handsome feels grateful. He saw something in Mist that connected them, and he's certain Mist felt it too. That's why he hesitated back in the labyrinth when it came to sealing the portal. Finding out Mist cared about him just as much made it all feel worth it for Handsome. Lost listens and understands, but he reminds Handsome that Mist wasn't the only one who cared for him. Lost considers Handsome a close friend too. Handsome believes it, but he explains that's why he wanted Lost out of the city. He wanted to protect him from this disaster, to let him keep living as an adventurer. Narcina interrupts, her voice sharp. She calls Handsome selfish for keeping the truth to himself and putting all this on Lost. She says true friendship isn't about hiding things, it's about trust. If he cared, he should have spoken up. Handsome admits she's right, but insists Lost stop healing him. He says it's too late now, and that everything he and Mist worked for has failed. Narcina doesn't accept this. Her voice is steady, but there's fire in her words. She tells Lost to keep healing Handsome, saying he has to live and take responsibility for his choices. Lost, moved by her conviction, continues treating him. Meanwhile, Marnell and the adventurers leave the barrier to defend the town. Lyra notices this and realizes they're trying to ease the burden on Ralma. Narcina sees even the town's roughest fighters stepping up, motivated by Amherst's promise of payment. Zeg is relieved they're helping in battle, and Armia points out that things have gone exactly how Mist planned except for the dragon taking his body. Ronaldo steps up and addresses the group, laying out the choices. They can either run or stay and fight the dragon. Lyra speaks first, saying running isn't an option. If the dragon isn't stopped, it'll destroy everything. They all agree to join Ronaldo and face the dragon head-on. Determination fills the air as they prepare for the fight of their lives. Lost agrees to join them, knowing he's healed Handsome enough to survive. But he tells Narcina to stay back, saying he can't risk the sleeping princess getting anywhere near the evil dragon. Armia makes the first move, firing her magic at the dragon to grab its attention. The dragon retaliates, summoning tree roots to attack them with its own magic. Zeg and Ronaldo cut down the roots, and the dragon sneers, thinking these weaklings can't even touch my stick. Lost is ready to prove him wrong. With Armia's help, he launches into the air and charges at the dragon with his dagger. But the dragon's faster. It uses the tree roots to stab Lost in the gut, sending him crashing to the ground, blood pouring from the wound. Narcina wants to run to him, but holds back, remembering his words. Handsome tells her she'll regret it if she doesn't go. That's all she needs to hear. She rushes toward Lost. The others fight their way to him, taking out every monster in their path. When Narcina reaches Lost, she's crushed by the sight of him in such a state. Lyra steps in, using her healing magic to stabilize him. Meanwhile, the dragon is relentless, continuing to hammer away at the town's barrier. Zeg watches, realizing the barrier could fall any second if this keeps up. He knows they need to get the townspeople to safety, but with nowhere to retreat, they're out of options. Narcina suddenly stands, determination burning in her eyes. She announces that she'll use the power of the sleeping princess. Ronaldo, alarmed, asks if she understands what that means. She knows, and she's certain there's no other choice. Ronaldo warns her that the sleeping princess's power isn't as strong as she might believe. The dragon will only stay asleep for 10 years. He asks if she's really willing to go through with it. Narcina acknowledges that 10 years isn't a lot of time, but it's not nothing either. She steps toward the dragon, telling the group to use the time she gives them to find a hero. She's confident Lost will succeed in that mission. Facing the dragon, she yells at it to devour her. But the dragon, unable to resist its instincts, moves to consume the sleeping princess, even as it fights the pull of its own nature. The evil dragon curses the sleeping princess for standing before him. Lost wakes up, sees what's happening, and pleads with Narcina to back away. As the tension rises, Lost taps into a mysterious power within him, a force even the evil dragon can't identify. The dragon's sure this power doesn't come from a human or a supreme being, and even Mist's consciousness inside the dragon is shocked. Mist acknowledges that whatever this is, it's incredibly powerful. Lost doesn't hesitate, he rushes the dragon, pounding it with his bare fists. Narcina tries to call out to him, but he doesn't hear her. Ronaldo watches, realizing how dangerous this is. He fears Lost won't be able to return to normal if he keeps going. Tears streaming, Narcina begs Lost to stop. Lost grabs the dragon by the neck, ready to end it, but Narcina steps in his path. Her presence makes him pause. She takes his hand, softly telling him she's here with him. Her words bring Lost back to himself, and his power fades. The dragon, taking advantage of the moment, tries to slip away, but Mist uses his will to freeze the dragon in place. Handsome looks to Lost and urges him to finish it. Lost hesitates, knowing that killing the dragon means killing Mist too. Mist tells him not to hold back. He says he's lived a long, full life and reassures Lost that this is the only way. With a heavy heart, Lost pulls out his dagger. Narcina steps forward, offering to do it if he can't, but Lost refuses. She insists on sharing the weight of this moment, and together they strike. Their combined effort ends the dragon, driving it out of Mist's body and sending it back through the portal it came from. Mist, with his final breaths, praises them for their bravery and strength, assuring them that they've stopped the dragon's return for now. The overwhelming mana in the region begins to fade, and the uprising comes to an end. Handsome holds Mist's hand as he slips away, calling him the closest thing to a father he's ever had. Mist smiles faintly, saying he was too young to be his son. Afterward, Ralma lowers the barrier around the town. As she emerges from the chamber, Ronaldo is there waiting. She asks if he's pushed himself too hard, but before she can collapse, he catches her in his arms. Ronaldo tells Ralma he swore to protect her with his life and would do anything to keep that promise. Ralma rolls her eyes, saying he shouldn't take such big vows without asking her first. Still, she thanks him, adding that she's looking forward to spending more time together. Elsewhere, a man gets a report. The uprising is over, Mist is dead, the evil dragon has gone back to sleep, and the sleeping princess is alive. He's relieved that the world has been saved, but starts wondering if this lost guy might actually be the hero they've been waiting for. Back at the guild, Handsome tells Amherst that she's now the new branch manager. Everyone's shocked, including Amherst. Handsome explains that he's too injured to handle it, and she's the only one worthy of the role. Amherst isn't so sure she's the right person for the job. Then Handsome casually mentions how much money comes with being the branch manager. That's all it takes. Amherst agrees to take the position immediately. Later that night, Zeg pulls Ronaldo aside, asking if he already knew about Lost's power. Ronaldo admits he did, and says it's something they'd never be able to control. He suggests leaving it to the guild at the royal capital to handle. Lyra quietly wonders if that means there's no reason for them to stay in Lost's party anymore. Zeg agrees, thinking their time together might be over. Outside the inn, Lost and Narcina have a private conversation. Lost talks about how the evil dragon will wake up again someday. He tells her he's planning to go on a journey to find the hero and invites her to come along if she wants to. Narcina smirks, asking if this was the big thing he kept putting off telling her. He shrugs, admitting it's kind of like that, but not exactly. He also says what he wanted to tell her earlier was a little different. Without hesitation, Narcina says she's coming with him. After all, forming a party with him was her goal from the beginning. The next morning, Lost and Narcina try to sneak out of the inn, but Sheila catches them and hands them a packed lunch. They ask how she knew they were leaving. Sheila grins, saying it was obvious. As they head off, their old party watches from a distance. Armia wonders if it's okay to let them go off alone. Lyra calmly says they shouldn't interfere if this is what they've decided. Zeg is confident their paths will cross again as long as they remain adventurers. Lost and Narcina take one last look at the city before turning toward their new journey, a quest to find the hero and face whatever comes next. That wraps up the final episode. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to stay tuned for more. I'd love to hear what you think, so drop your thoughts in the comments.